Okay, Miss Katie, if you please call the roll. Please call the roll.
That middle button. Right there, that one. Thank you. Representative Zarang.
Here.
Here. Representative Adams. Here. Representative Bacala. Here. Representative Carpenter. Here. Representative Carrier. Here. Representative Carter. Representative Cruz. Here. Representative Desatel. Here. Representative Dubuisson. Here. Representative Edmonds. Here. Representative Freeman. Representative Harris. Here. Representative Ilg. Representative Jones. Here. Representative Kerner. Here. Representative Lyons. Representative McGee. Representative Marcel. Here. Representative McFarland. Here. Representative Miguez. Representative Miller. Here. Representative Romero. Here. Representative Thompson. Representative Turner. Here. Representative Wheat. Here. We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Miss Katie, and thank you all for being here today. All right, first bill we're going to take up today is going to be HB 642. Speaker's bill. This is the one dealing with the distribution of monies for the American Rescue Plan. That's HB 642. Okay, members, just to go a little bit over what 642 does, it provides for the distribution of funds from the Federal American Rescue Plan Act. And I'd like to offer a set of amendments that lay out our plan for the distribution of these funds. And if we could offer those amendments to put it in proper posture. Okay, Miss Amanda.
All right, Mr. Chairman and members, this is amendment set number 1078, and it's available online, and I believe you also have a hard copy. Do you want to explain the amendments?
Yeah. Okay. So what the amendments basically do is all funds received from the American Rescue Plan Act, with the exception of the $400 million that will be going directly to the Unemployment Trust Fund, will go into the Louisiana Rescue Plan Fund. From there, the money will be allocated to 4 programs. The first would be $300 million for the Louisiana Water Infrastructure Program.
Where's the gumbo happening?
The granting underserved municipalities broadband.
Okay, the next is $90 million for the Gumbo Broadband Program, which is the granting underfunded municipalities broadband program, opportunity program. The next is $10 million for the Louisiana Loggers Relief Program and $4.5 million for the Louisiana Save Our Screens Program. So the infrastructure program, just to give you a little brief on that, is in the amendment, we're setting up a grant program to provide funding for the community water systems and sewer systems throughout the state, and the program will be administered by the Office of Public Health, who will work with the Department of Environmental Quality and the Office of Community Development and the Legislative Auditor to review and rate applications from local governments and water and sewer systems and make recommendations to JLCB for funding projects. And members, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we want to make sure that we optimize our ability to make significant improvements in the clean water for many of the communities throughout the state. The next, the Gumbo program, broadband program, and this amendment will provide funding for the broadband grant program established in HB 648 by Representative Desatel. The Loggers Relief Program, this amendment sets up a program to provide grants to timber harvesting and timber hauling businesses who suffered revenue loss to COVID-19. These businesses hadn't been included in any of the federal agricultural relief programs that other farmers and agricultural producers had been able to utilize. So this program will be administered by the Treasurer's Office using existing resources from the Main Street Recovery Program. The next, Louisiana Save Our Screens program, this amendment also sets up a program to provide grants to movie theaters in Louisiana who are forced to close or reduce capacity due to COVID-19. This program will also be administered by the Treasurer's Office. Okay, so with that, members, let's see if we have any questions. First question is from Representative Cruz.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. My heart goes out to those theaters that had to close during the the response to COVID. My question, though, is kind of concerning how good an investment this might be for the state of Louisiana. It seems to me people are turning more and more to the online things, and I just wonder if this is a great investment. I was wondering if someone could speak to that maybe.
Sure, we can do that. I think we have someone representing the movie industry here as well. How much they send into
How much they getting? 10? No,
4.5. 4.5 million.
4 million.
4.5.
Please introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Ron Kruger. I'm the president of Southern Theaters based out of New Orleans.
And Mr. Chairman, my name's Steve Duke. I'm here on behalf of the theater owners of Mid-America.
Thank you. And you've heard the question from Representative Cruz. Just wondering if either of you gentlemen would like to comment on that?
Sure. I mean, movie theaters, I can speak from history as well. I'm a fourth-generation movie theater operator, and the impact that movie theaters have in our communities is substantial. Not only do we support complementary industries, dinner and movie, think about all those vendors that benefit there, but you also think about all the suppliers that we complement. You know, I've got a lot of businesses that I pay to maintain my buildings. The popcorn that I pop and top, there's a plant in Opelousas, Louisiana. I buy all that product from them, complementing that. So I've got a lot of employees that I employ as well. So, I mean, it's a $150 million industry in 2019, and it's a valuable industry to the state.
I think it is. My question really is, do you see a good future in the movie industry? I see people paying $20 for one movie online now, so obviously they either have a great home theater or whatever, or they don't want to go out. I'm just wondering, do you think this is an industry that is going to continue to be viable in the next decade or so?
Very much so. As again, fourth generation member of the industry, we've seen highs and lows. This is one of our big lows. There have been some recent movies that have come out that have demonstrated there's a desire to come back out to movie theaters, and there's value in that for guests. So yes, by all means, it has the ability to survive and will survive, and we look at this particular proposal as a way to just to get us over the hump to the return of good box office product later this summer.
Has some other states, say Florida, that opened up earlier, have they shown people returning? I mean, do you have any statistics on any of that?
Well, one of the things, Representative Cruz, couple of questions you got. One, typically right now, there's about 18 months worth of stuff in the can right now from a production standpoint that's being held up because it's like movies only have a certain life, to try and make back what they've invested in it, and it's been difficult. But until you see more stuff happening on the East and West Coast, we're going to be kind of held hostage by what's happening in these other states because they don't want to release exactly right now. The thing is, to go back to your first question, there's always been things that have popped up in the movie industry. One of the first things that came up years ago, most of you remember, it's like when movies started coming out on tape and stuff, people are going, well, I'm not, well, the movie theaters are done. And it was always things that have happened like that over the years. I can tell you, for whatever reason, when I started law school, I asked somebody, I said, how do you get through? And they said, well, you need to date your wife. And I kind of looked and I thought about that, and it was true. And I said, my wife and I would go to a movie just to get away from our house and get away from the stress and strain. It might have been that I was in a dark room and she didn't have to look at me. I'm not sure, but it was one of those things where we actually got to go and do that. And people still spend a large amount of their disposable income actually wanting to go out. And what it does is not only does this help the theater owners, it's also going to help those other vendors and stuff that are in the same shopping centers and stuff because of the foot traffic that it drives, into other areas and stuff. So there's a number of different things. I mean, I know it looks like it's a line item for us that's in here, but I think that the theater owners have been hit as hard as anybody by COVID out there.
Yeah, I'm not denying any of that. I was just saying if you're seeing a recovery, if it looks like it's coming back.
I can tell you that there's a lot in the can, but maybe, Ron can speak to that.
Yeah, as Mr. Duke said, the coasts are what's defining the release of movies. And just March of this year, California and New York City reopened. And that's what the Hollywood studios are looking for in terms of finally starting to release their major titles. So starting Memorial Day weekend, looks like we've got a string of key titles that are going to bring our business back. But
Okay.
we need to bridge it to get there.
Let us know how we do after that then. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Cruz. Representative Edmonds.
I have a question on the amendment, but not from them.
Okay. I have a question for you. Wait, we have a question from Representative Carpenter.
Thank you,
Wait,
Ms.
oh, there you go. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your proposal, there's a statement that says you're to provide premium pay to certain essential workers. Can you elaborate a little further?
I'm not
I'm not familiar with that.
That's not in this amendment.
Not on the amendment. Mine is on the bill.
But it's not specific to them.
It's not?
No, ma'am.
Okay. But that statement is in there.
That's something that's on,
In the digest. Abstract.
no, that's something that's on one of the other.
Yeah.
that's-
See number 2?
Right, well, it just delineates the usage for the ARPA fund is what the money will be used for within the bill.
That's my question.
Yes.
That's what I want to be clear on. Do you see
And the
it?
amendment deleted that.
Okay, perfect. Because I was getting to that, who they were, what was it. So if it's deleted, it's fine. Thank you.
Okay, Representative Miller.
Yes, did y'all industry qualify for PPP loans?
Depending on, yes, the industry did, but it depended on the size of your business and the number of employees that you had, whether you could qualify for that particular loan or not.
So what about the Main Street program that we initially did that the treasurer put together? Did y'all qualify for that as well?
I can speak for my business. We were too large. We operate 5 locations throughout the state and a number of other locations across the country, and we were too large.
But for the LLCs, the corporations who didn't have a large business, they qualified for the Louisiana Main Street grant previously, correct?
Very small businesses would be my understanding that were eligible for those.
Representative Miller, one of the gentlemen in the back said that he did qualify, but he didn't get anything, and he's actually from the New Orleans area, Britannia.
For the individuals who did receive the initial grant, is it fair to say they shouldn't double dip? For the ones who did receive that Louisiana Main Street grant, is it fair to say that we maybe should exclude them from this particular funding?
Well, I don't know how many did or did not get to that point, but I think one of the things that we're trying to get to with this particular grant, if you will, is that, you know, it's 4.3 or 4.5 million, but it's enough to keep these guys open to start work their way actually into the summertime when these films are going to start to come back out where they can survive on their own.
But I'm reading it correctly. If I am, it says up to $10,000, right? So each business would only get up to $10,000.
It'd be $10,000 per screen. So if you got a multiplex that's in your district, then, you know, if they had 4 screens, they would be able to get $40,000 to stay open between now and the end of the summer.
And it's in the form of a grant. You don't pay this back, correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay. And we're just trying to weigh in how important it. We know this is very important, but how as important it is do we choose this program versus the rest of the businesses in Louisiana? One last question. You mentioned that you had a plant in Opelousas. What does that plant do?
I don't have a plant in Opelousas. I'm sorry. Where my popcorn, big popular movie-going popcorn, the company that I buy the popping oil and topping oil is based in Opelousas. So my point was...
Ventura Oils? Okay.
Correct. My business complements other businesses in the state.
I got you. Well, I'm from Opelousas. I didn't know if you were throwing me hints or something. It opened my... Thank you.
I do operate in Lafayette.
All right, but thank you.
But they will be contacting you. So just, okay, Representative Lyons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if this question is for them. This is regarding the Main Street recovery program. So the question I have is, I know we're extending this to individual companies, what have you, who were actually in line for funding, but the funding was exhausted the first time over. Is there a limit or a cap on the amount of funds that's in that particular part?
For within this, you're talking about for the film?
No, it wasn't for them. It's just to the Main Street recovery overall for the businesses. This is up to this is Part C in the Main Street recovery program. What I'm asking about on the amendment. On the amendment on line 18, where it talks about the priority given to businesses that previously submitted applications, but whose applications were not considered due to exhaustion of monies. I just want to know if the additional monies that's here, is there a certain amount that's limited for that particular portion?
But those were the business who had previously applied.
Yes, but they previously applied, but they didn't get any money or weren't considered because the money was gone.
Right. Hold on. Let's let Ms. Amanda clarify that.
Yes, and that provision, that applies to just the logging businesses and the movie theater businesses that previously applied, not other categories of businesses. Yes, sir, just those two businesses. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Representative Desatel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple quick questions. How many total screens do we have here in Louisiana?
Right around 430 screens.
430. And out of those 430, how many are owned by Louisiana companies?
Let me look here real quick. Say approximately a third.
So approximately 30% are Louisiana-owned businesses. The other 70 are out of state.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. That's it for the questions. Board is clear with cards in support. Wait, oh, I'm sorry. That's right. Okay, Representative Edmonds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is there a total, do we already know the total appropriation dollar that this will go into this fund?
Well, it's the first half of the rescue dollars. So
Okay.
again, 400 is going to go to unemployment, and
All right, I see
the
the-
first tranche is going to go. So it's 1.6, and of that, 400 will go to directly on unemployment. The rest will go in these funds.
Did you have a number on the water? Was it
300.
300?
million, yes, sir.
And then I saw 90 million that's down in the, is that in the broadband?
Yeah, and we're going to go through this in the HB1 set, and you'll see it as we go through it, and it'll
Okay.
delineate the specific dollar amounts as well.
Okay, well that's
90
what I
for
was.
broadband and 10 for loggers of those.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, wishing to speak, Commissioner Darden.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Jay Darden, Commissioner. I'm just reviewing the amendment for the first time as you are, and I guess I need to ask a couple of questions, if I may, first, because I'm trying to understand how much money we're talking about. Is the intent to put the entire $1.6 billion into a fund? Because the only amounts that are allocated, as I appreciate it, are total 404.5 million. Is the rest of the money also allocated in this bill?
Not allocated other than as delineated within the amendment, but of that, the money that's coming in the first tranche, 400 will go to unemployment and the rest will go into the fund.
And is the remainder of the money that would be in that first tranche is not appropriated in the amendment? Is it appropriated in the bill?
It will. You'll see in HB1 where specific dollar amounts. Yes,
okay.
sir.
And the only thing I wanted to mention, because I certainly want to get this on the record, and they're going to be, I'm sure, countless numbers of requests for this money. all of which have merit because everybody was impacted negatively by the pandemic. I would note that the new money, this money that we're getting, the only use of it that's allowable under the language of the Act, and we have not yet gotten the guidelines yet, is for lost revenue. So anybody who would be eligible under this amendment and anybody who would be eligible under for the entirety of the money that is not a government recipient like a water sewer program like we're talking about is going to have to be based upon lost revenue. So I just want to make sure that's understood. It's not really a grant per se as it was with the CARES Act, because the CARES Act could not fund lost revenue. It had to be based upon some other need. And as I appreciate the language of this amendment, if there is some CARES Act money left, it is going to be utilized for this purpose and operated by the treasurer with a 5% administrative cost. And I just want to be clear, and maybe this is more pertinent on the HB1, and I don't want to get off of what the topic of the amendment is. I just want to point out that the recommendation that the administration would make is more limited than what is proposed here, getting into specific industries, because we believe money ought to go to infrastructure for the state, the unemployment fund as is contemplated in this amendment, and also the $230 million reimbursement to the unemployment trust fund, which is not mentioned in this amendment, but that's an important component because the state is on the hook for about $230 million for unemployment benefits paid to our citizens through September of this year. And we certainly believe that $230 million on top of the $400 million that's going into the trust fund is appropriate. We're also recommending the water program that is a part of this specific bill that you'll hear more details about later. And we're recommending money to the ports of Louisiana as well as a significant amount to tourism that again will be discussed, I guess, as we get into HB1 and how that money is distributed. So I understand the need that it may exist in the timber industry, in the movie industry, in the broadband world. I just point out that one of the things the governor said in making his recommendation was that we have to be careful not to try and divide this up into too many small pots, because small numbers going somewhere may not have the impact that it would if you have big dollars going to major programs. I would also just point out that we have $180 million in the broadband program that was allocated by the federal government completely independent of the rescue plan. So we are going to have $180 million to distribute in grants to the infrastructure needs, primarily rural, in broadband. So I understand there's
To that point, Commissioner, so we were looking for that. I mean, we have within the rescue plan, where are those dollars, those additional dollars outside of what was allocated?
They were part of the December enactment by Congress. It specified $180 million for the state of Louisiana for broadband. That is under the purview of Mr. Iyengar, our new broadband individual, who's been working with Representative Deschantel and others to structure a program for grants that would be distributed across the state. That's going to be a very active and vibrant and outstanding program. I'm very confident it is going to be. That $180 million will go a long way. Any additional money obviously adds more money to that pot, but I would just suggest to you that $180 million is a good start for broadband, and the dollars that we're getting from the rescue plan, we just believe would be better spent on the recommendations made by the governor. But that's obviously a decision y'all are going to make as you determine where those dollars go and how they're going to be spent.
Thank you. And just to be clear, too, Commissioner, that of this and what you see, and you'll see it in HB1, that $800 million is going to be allocated. There's still $800 million that will go through the process and through the fund that could be put to all those suggested uses and other opportunities to make sure we use to maximize the availability of the funds.
Right. And I know you will do that, and it's going to give us a great opportunity. The recommendation is for half of that money. It sounds like that's what you're agreeing as well, that 1.6 would be the magic number that we would be requesting and distributing in the upcoming budget year.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Are there any questions of the Commissioner on this? I'm sure you'll be back for HB1, but is there any questions for the Commissioner regarding this particular bill?
I have general questions both of you.
Wait, hold on. Okay, wait, hold on. Representative Cruz is up first. Let me just ask Representative Cruz, you have a question for the Commissioner? Okay, we'll come back to that. Let's see. Representative Miguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. A few of us were delayed this morning. I don't want to be redundant, but I'm trying to make sure I have a full understanding of this bill. It's a very important bill. I know it spends a lot of American Rescue Plan dollars. So the original shape of the bill is we are creating a fund that we're going to basically take the first payment of the American Rescue Plan money, except for the $400 million that's going to go into the unemployment fund. We're going to put it all into this American Rescue Plan Act fund. Is this the same fund we're going to use for the second tranche of money that's going to come down the road? Is going to stay in perpetuity?
Yes.
And
The dollars.
okay, and then tell me about the amendment. So and I'm trying to reconcile between what the commissioner was saying on the amendments. Are we creating a number of sub funds? Because that's
For the utilization of the funds, yes, from the rescue dollars.
okay. And so tell me how the sub funds work and how we're going to integrate those with HB1, the mechanisms of how this is going to work out. And you may have said that in your opening, but like I said, I was a little delayed.
But basically what it's going to do, and it's all has to be appropriated through JLCB, but essentially these dollars are specific to address these particular funds. The Largo Fund will be allocated and administered through similar to the CARES Act program, through the Treasurer's Office, and also the screen fund for the screens, the movie theaters.
Okay, so we have $400 million that's going to the unemployment fund. How much is that first payment for American Rescue Plan? The total?
You may want, if you'd like, I don't want to put you off, but we are talking the specific allocations within HB1, and we'll go over those numbers. We can either do it now and do it again in HB1.
Okay, so we haven't covered that part just yet.
We're going to do that next in HB1.
So this is basically the framework.
Setting up the framework, yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I want to know. Thanks so much for catching me up.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
No problem. Let's see, Representative Marcel, you had a question? Wait, I'm sorry, I hit the wrong one. There you go. Oh, wait, hold on. There we go. Try that.
All righty. Okay. Yes, I did. So the amendments that I'm looking at actually or our plans to, and I think you just answered my question, we're going to go over all of this in HB1. These are specific.
This is setting up the framework, and then we will go through the dollars.
This is setting up the framework, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And all of these items have to be approved through joint budget? Once we lay them out here, is that it?
Once but as long as it fits within the program that's identified, then those funds will be allocated through the
Then it
treasurer.
will be
Similar to
allocated.
the Main Street program.
Okay, so the Main Street program, are these, I think I see somewhere in the amendments where a small business with 50 or less people that are applying for these grants, they can't go over and above the dollars that they've lost regardless of whether they've gotten money from another portion of the program. Is that right?
Right, there's a limit within those
There's
two
a limit?
programs. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's what I was concerned about, the limit. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see, Representative Cruz.
Yeah, I was just wondering if someone could speak to how we came up with an amount of $300 million for the water infrastructure fund. Do we have specific projects identified, or just wondering how that number was derived?
I'm sorry, Representative Cruz. What was your question again?
How the amount of $300 million was created for that water infrastructure fund? Where did that figure come from?
Sure. And so basically what we did in anticipation and working with the administration and primarily the agencies that do this on a day-to-day basis, LDH, DEQ, and CDBG, who manage the clean water, the water projects. There's funds that are set up to provide for communities to help them improve their systems, their water systems. And this funding was allocated, as the commissioner indicated, specific for this purpose. And so what we're doing is relying on the current system, and then they will identify the priorities within the program, and they've identified critical projects of roughly $300 million. It doesn't necessarily mean that's it. Again, we're getting another tranche of money next year that could ultimately be applied to that as well. But this was identified for the agencies who do this, have provided a list that we're going through that to prioritize those systems that need it the most, and then making sure that we can make those improvements. Because some of them, they couldn't meet the criteria previously, but this is a way that some who either couldn't afford it or also looking at ways to, not just on a capital outlay project by project basis, this is going to provide an opportunity that in some instances where consolidation is better, you're looking at a larger project to where you can address more critical needs and on a larger basis that have long-term sustainability, and that's what's going to be important at utilizing those dollars and those entities, the agencies who utilize this and do this on a daily basis are making recommendations that ultimately will be appropriated through JLCB.
Okay, but there is some backlog list, and they identified, hey, we've got at least 300 million worth that we need to attack with this.
And we're going to actively work with communities to make sure that they're aware of the program so that we can make sure that we're hearing from as many as possible to make those needed improvements.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, question from, let's see, Representative Bacala.
Mr. Chair, because we're looking at part of the money here and part of the money in HB1, a quick question. Are any of the 1.6 in either of these instruments going to go toward infrastructure?
At this point, well, the water infrastructure that we're just discussing, there's $300 million that's going to infrastructure. The other question is the money will be placed in a fund and then identify critical needs that meet the criteria as established by the regulations to provide money for those projects. So,
well, I'm really talking about
we're waiting
roads,
for the guidance. We're waiting for the final guidance before we start allocating specific dollars.
Will there be funds, part of the 1.6 undedicated that can later be dedicated to infrastructure?
Right. We have about $800 million that can be.
Okay, so 800 million has not been earmarked for any particular purpose? Is that
Yes,
kind
sir.
of? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Let's see. Representative Miller.
Mr. Chairman, quick question. When it comes to the water projects, we aren't going to penalize any local municipalities that's not willing to join a system from applying, are we? Like, we're not developing an application just for municipalities that want to join water systems, correct?
No, the intent is not to penalize, but the intent is to incentivize. Because obviously there are some communities who are either unwilling or don't have the capability to do it. So what we're doing is trying to incentivize them and also trying to ask that if it's important to them that those communities who have an opportunity can provide some support in cost. We're looking at either a cost share. There will be established criteria that will be developed to incentivize local communities, municipalities, to put the best system for their region. It may be consolidation. Consolidation is not the answer for all systems, but there's some, and some communities may be reluctant to do it, but if it's in their best interest, we will try to incentivize that. If not, then the money won't be allocated to them.
So if they choose not to consolidate due to it not being in their best interest, they won't be able to apply for these funds?
No, they can apply.
They still
Anybody
can
can
apply.
apply. Now, whether or not they'll get the funds will be dependent upon both the prioritization and how it's going to benefit the community, the municipality, or the region.
Okay, because many of these local municipalities, I mean, that's the majority of their funding in their budget. So I just don't want to hold this over their head to get the money that you must join the system. But I think you answered my question. Thank you.
It's not to hold or penalize anyone, but what it's trying to do is to encourage them to take advantage of this opportunity, this one-time opportunity. We want to ensure that we maximize this opportunity to benefit and improve the systems that a lot of them are in critical need.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just add on that, for the benefit of the committee, the leadership of the legislature and the administration and representatives of each of those three agencies met last week and talked about what we might be able to do, working together to come up with a plan. And there's a working group that was formed as a result of that, with a representative of LDH, a representative of DEQ, representative of CDBG, a representative from the House, and a representative from the Senate, to work out recommended rules and regulations, guidelines for the administration of that money. So there's a working group right now that's busily trying to figure out exactly, specifically how this will work, what eligibility will be there, what incentives, as the chairman indicated, might be put in place. So that's happening, and that's a very good thing to try and bring some clarity to how this money would be spent. And the $300 million really came from a recommendation from the administration in trying to allocate the $1.6 billion. Their needs are much, much greater than $300 million in sewer and water all across the state, realistically. But that was the number that was reached and landed upon, and obviously it's subject to the legislature's determination of how much should be allocated in that area.
And Mr. Commissioner, I'm just asking to be fair. I don't want a small town to not get any revenue to repair a water well that might cost $2 million just because they won't give up 40% of their revenue and join a water system. That's my only concern, is that we be fair with them. to have an opportunity to get some of these funds.
I understand, and I think that's what everybody recognizes. We want to be fair. We also want to take advantage of the maximum use of this money to make certain that we take advantage of creating a long-term sustainable water and sewer program for communities, for parishes, for areas that may benefit from consolidating and be able to maintain. Because one of the keys I think you're going to see coming out of this group, and I'm not on it, but I know I heard the discussion, is the ability to sustain the improvements that are made. And that means having maintenance availability and making certain that the resources are there to make sure you can pay for that system going forward. Because what we learned from the departments was a lot of times these grants or these loans have been issued, they're ultimately forgiven, but they're invested, and a few years later the same entity is back because they don't have the maintenance in place to ensure that the system is going to continue to work. So we're really just throwing that money away. So we got to be smart about how we spend this one-time shot we've got with this infusion from the federal government.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Miller. Representative Desatel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Dorton, for that explanation. One of the questions I have is, you said there's a committee that was established to kind of help set up the guidelines for this water initiative. One of the thoughts that I have, and I don't know how I relay this to the committee, but I figured this would be a good time. In some cases, up to 90% of the cost of installing broadband is the actual digging up the sides of the streets and the roads. And if we're going to spend, $300 or possibly $600 million in water systems, I'm assuming a lot of that there's going to be opportunity to parallel conduits or broadband at the same time, saving us, the state a lot of money. So I think, I don't know how to make those recommendations, but I think we should award or, reward systems that are thinking about that. And I don't know how to do that, but I think it'd be a good thing to think about.
I think it would be too. I think that's a great point. And part of what our recommendation is, and this gets to some of the administrative questions, our suggestion is that the division monitor and handle the broadband component, since we have the broadband office, and oversee the operation of the water system effort as well, because those are all three departments of government. And I think that gives us some oversight and some ability to take advantage of exactly what you're talking about, to make sure we're only digging once. If we have to lay fiber, if we have to lay pipes, it's a good suggestion. It's something we ought to think about. And it's going to take some coordination, obviously.
And it will, and it's gonna be, I think, system by system. But if we could somehow create some kind of reward for systems who actually are thinking about that and put that in their plan, I think would be very helpful for our state.
Suggestion.
Yeah,
thank you.
And that has been mentioned in the committee and having sat in some of those meetings, and we will make sure we reiterate that point as well, Representative Desatel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Let's see, Representative Miguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the second bite at the apple. I'm looking at the amendments in the bill, and it seems like, and we talked about this earlier, this bill sets up different tranches of money, basically, and where we're going to send those allocations. So later on in HB1, we would specifically spend those dollars, particularly within those funds. So I think now would probably be the appropriate time to just get an understanding, a summary of how many dollars are going to go to each particular fund. So I see the first on the list would be the Louisiana Main Street Recovery Program. That would be very similar to what we passed during the CARES Act, a very similar program, which looks like it has some sub tranches. How much money are we going to be putting into that tranche? And I see there's like a sub to it for the Forestry Association, the Screens Program, and the Louisiana Loggers. So give me an overall dollar amount for that one.
Okay, we're not giving any more money to the Main Street program. The only thing within the funds that we're adding to is the $10 million for the loggers and $4.5 million for Save Our Screens.
Okay.
And they're going to be a component and run by the Main Street program.
Okay, so this is not putting any new funds into Main Street lending?
No, other than just allowing for these two funds.
Okay, I'm reading down. I see there's the Louisiana Water Infrastructure Fund. How many dollars are we putting there?
$300 million.
Okay, then we have broadband. Are we putting 90 there?
Yes, sir.
And we're putting 400 in unemployment. Am I missing any particular funds, or does that sum them up?
That's it. That's it within this bill.
I have a question for the commissioner.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Dorn. I apologize. I think the governor, everything's been happening very quickly around here. The governor put out his recommendations on where to spend the American Rescue Plan dollars. Can Can you tell me from your understanding of this? First of all, I want to get a full understanding exactly what y'all recommendations are and what's in this bill, and reconcile them against each other, and get your thoughts.
All right, the governor's recommendations are as follows, and this is for the entirety of the 1.6. I think there's agreement that we only want to request half of the $3 billion plus amount. And so the 1.6 is what the magic number is that we would be requesting for the upcoming fiscal year. And we believe we will get that from the federal government because the law anticipates
That's the first tranche of the money. And then the rest, the second tranche comes, is it 16 or 18 months later?
It can come. It's uncertain right now how quickly it can come or whether you have to wait a particular amount of time. I think that's a question that has to be answered. But we know that the second tranche has to be expended by December 31 of 2024. So we potentially run out for 2 more fiscal years potentially to be able to spend the money. But the thinking is let's get half of it right now because we need it to invigorate the economy, to take care of some serious issues. And so rather than asking for the whole, we ask for half, and that's a lot of money, $1.6 billion that we have to decide.
Before you go on, does the administration have all of the information currently about how this money can be spent? Or are we still waiting? Because I know a lot of dates got floated around this place. In mid-May, we were thinking that would be the target date when we know everything. Do we know everything today?
No, we don't. Nobody in America knows everything yet. Everybody's anxiously waiting for the same thing, and that is the guidelines like we got for the CARES Act. The governor made the formal request of the federal government last week. We anticipate that first amount of money may be in the Treasury or coming to us as soon as in the next couple of weeks. We don't know that for sure, but the idea has always been that sometime in May, these first distributions are going to be going to the state. So our expectation is we will have the money in hand sometime in May. And that's one of the reasons why we want to make sure we have an appropriation and language to take care of it. So we don't have the guidelines yet. They may provide further clarification that changes the way we're looking at this very discussion we're having, because right now we know that we're limited to 4 things that are set forth in the language of the Act itself, one of which is water, sewer, and broadband uses, and the other one is for continuing COVID expenses. One is for incentives to pay frontline workers. It's not that really needs some fleshing out. And the last one is to recoup lost revenues as a result of the pandemic, which we could not do under CARES, but we specifically can do under the rescue plan. So that means everybody in the country is going to be looking at how they lost revenue. How much did they lose? The state, for example, we've determined we think our magic number is about $400 million. And it's fairly simple from the state standpoint because we can look at the REC forecast for FY19 and we can look at the REC forecast and the reality of what happened in FY20 and take the difference, and that's the lost revenue to the state. It's fairly simple.
On that, you would have to get an updated REC forecast to determine that?
No, because we're only talking about the difference between FY19 and FY20.
Okay.
So that's where the $400 million came from in the recommendation that I'll go through in just a second for infrastructure, because that's the only amount that the state believes we can document for lost revenue is $400 million. So we can't use it for anything other than that right now, except for the part that can be used for water, sewer, and broadband. So to answer your question, this is what the governor recommended. $400 million for the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund to start rebuilding that fund with the understanding that the legislature, would continue the provision that is currently in law that businesses are not going to see an increase in their unemployment expenditures.
And you see the $400 million in this funds bill, so it looks like the legislature and the administration are on the same page there. Wouldn't you agree?
They're on the same page on that. I agree. The second provision that is not in this amendment is $230 million to go to the unemployment insurance reimbursement for what the feds have paid our citizens dating back a couple of months and continuing through September of this year, because our trust fund is down to nothing. So
this is our note that we're getting interest free until September.
Correct.
That we're going to have to start paying interest on in September.
That's right. And so the suggestion is, let's say $230 million of this money, because it was pandemic related, and pay back the federal government so we're not charged any interest and we're slick with the federal government. So that would be a total of $630 that would be related to the unemployment fund. All right, then on top of that is
But the $400 million that's put in this bill could be used to pay that back, correct? How's it structured? I know you want 630, but the 400 that the chairman's putting in, and I don't know if that's a good
I
question
think
for
that's
the
going
chairman.
directly into the trust fund under the, I'm not looking at the language of the amendment. I think
But-
it's going to the trust
Yeah, it's
fund.
going right into the trust
But
fund.
we have the ability to pay the loan out of the trust fund, or it has to be paid out of HB1.
I don't believe that loan can be repaid out of the trust fund. I'm not sure about that, but that's something you can work out. But the point you're
Yeah.
making is correct. If there's 400 in there and 230 of it wanted to go to the reimburse the feds on the front end, you could certainly designate it for that purpose.
But the payment shows up in House Bill 1, so we have to appropriate it, so we are appropriating it in HB1 to cover that.
I hate to. Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
The 400 million that we're putting in for the unemployment trust fund. The way our intent is today, do we plan on using that to shore up the fund, or use that to pay down some of our debt?
It's to shore up the fund, but I know the commissioner referenced the fact that the administration would like to do that. We could do that, but that's where the $800 million we have that's not allocated. It's going to be up to the body and JLCB to determine how to best use that. So the capability is there. Again, the whole point
so
the
I see
commissioner
what-
meant, wait, please, let me finish.
Yes.
The commissioner indicated that we don't have the regulations, and until that final notice comes through, I mean, it's prudent to maybe wait, apart from the water, which we know it can be used for, wait until the final regs come out so we can allocate those dollars.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That clears up a lot there, Mr. Chairman. So it looks like we're spending roughly around $700-800 million here in this in these tranches, and we'll have another $800 million out there.
Yes, sir.
Which we just clarify we would spend that money through HB1 or a funds bill, or that would be spent through joint budget.
It would be within this fund and then appropriated through joint budget.
Okay, I appreciate that's clearing up a lot. So I'm starting to see it now. Jay, I know you had some more comments.
But one other point too, if it's within session, we can do it here with this in body, but outside of session, obviously, it's going to have to be through joint.
And we'll make that determination through the process.
Yes, sir.
Moving forward. Okay, thanks so much. That's very helpful.
So just to repeat, $400 million to the fund. This is the governor's recommendation. $400 million to the fund, $230 to pay the advances that have been made by the federal government at no interest. Then the rest of these allocations are, other than the $300 million for the water systems, that is part of the governor's recommendation as well. So the remainder of what I'll describe is not a part of the amendment that's before you right now, but this is the recommendation of the governor to make up the balance of the $1.6 billion. That would be $400 million to infrastructure. In response to Representative Bacala's question, the governor is recommending $400 million go basically to DOTD for infrastructure, roads, bridges, and what have you, to address the backlog we have there. An additional $125 million to the CVBs and tourism entities that can prove their lost revenue from 19 to 20 in the pandemic year. That would affect every CVB in the state, obviously, because everybody has had some provable loss because their hotel motel revenues no doubt went down, and that's what the primary funding for CVBs are. Also, that would make eligible some entities like the Superdome, for example, that is not eligible for any other money, but can show a very clear loss of revenue because of the Saints games, the Pelicans games, and the cancellation of concerts and other events. All that would be part of the 125 based purely upon lost revenue. An additional $20 million is recommended directly to CRT, Lieutenant Governor's Office, for tourism purposes to promote the state because we're in an extremely competitive environment right now with everybody in the world having seen tourism shut down. We need to be out there marketing Louisiana to individual leisure travelers as well as to conventions to replace the hit that we took at the convention center in New Orleans, at the River Center here in Baton Rouge, the Cajun Dome in Lafayette. Every entity in the state that had events that got canceled lost revenue. And then finally, the last sliver is $50 million to the ports of Louisiana, again on a grant basis based upon lost revenue. All of this would be based upon lost revenue, and the ports, tourism, and the water system program would all be handled by the division based upon the methodology that was already established in the CARES Act. that we can do, frankly, very inexpensively, relatively speaking. I proposed last time that the division be compensated 0.5% by way of an administrative cost. And that same proposal would be out there, although we would also say it ought to be based upon a provable amount of time that was spent, because we keep track of the time of everybody that's working on this. We can do it very inexpensively.
But in that scenario, how would we make sure that that the money is distributed equitably across every port or CVB, and it's not under any kind of political motive?
Because
Tell me how would you?
We would structure it in the same way that we did the local CARES program, where there was a timeline set for people to make applications, and you had to apply by X date, proving your losses. Frankly, I think it's relatively simple for each of these entities. Again, comparing their financial statements from 19 to 20, submit that. We'd have a deadline. Everybody's got to submit by such and such a date, and then it would be prorated, whatever amount of money we had allocated based upon the demand that was there. I don't know that we have any way of knowing exactly how much the total would be, particularly in the tourism program, but that's how we would ensure it's done fairly and it's done equitably, equally to everybody who makes a submission, and not favoring one particular parish or punishing one particular parish. It would be everybody's eligible. Show us your losses, and you'll get a prorated amount.
So going through it, I appreciate all the comments, and you running through the summary with me. You have to be pretty happy, I would imagine, with the amendments. I know they're not, probably no amendment is ever perfect, but your request and what you've gone through, outside of some of the lost revenues and the infrastructure, which we still have $80 million out there that we can appropriate through this process once we get the full guidance. But I mean, $400 million going to unemployment, $300 million going to water and sewage, $90 million to broadband. There's another about $40 million between loggers, screens, and I can't remember the other one. The Forestry Association, also screens. I mean theaters. Generally, your opinion, I would imagine you'd be generally supportive of this amendment.
I would be supportive of what the governor recommended primarily, and the only caveat, it's not that I'm against any of those entities, the only caveat I would give you is that they will not be the only people who will step up to the plate. I mean, once the word is out that a particular industry got particular treatment in this bill, I think you'll see others that will do that. And I think the caveat is, if you start trying to just make everybody happy and throw a little bit out there to everybody who comes forward and say, wait a minute, what about me? I lost revenue as well. You're going to dilute the effectiveness of the money, because it's not going to have the impact that it would in big dollars spent in these primary areas that we know are important to the economy of Louisiana. And that's the only reason I would say that I had some reluctance about the particular allocation.
And we can work those details out through the process, but you would agree as well, and I'm not in the logging industry. I know a guy next to me that is. That certain industries were hit harder than others, and in the past, it's not out of precedent. We spent money on bars, restaurants, gig workers, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly. Specific areas that were hit extra hard during the first phases of the pandemic, which the first few federal stimulus packages that came through. This wouldn't be out of the ordinary.
No, I would say it probably would not be out of the ordinary, and it probably is going to be the same discussion that's held in this state capital is probably being held in state capitals around the country right now, because everybody's got a lot of money to spend.
Well, I appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time to go through it with the members here today.
Yes,
thank you, Mr. Chairman, for all your information as well.
Thank you, Representative Miguez. And Commissioner, just to clarify a point too. You indicated that $400 million you can identify for lost revenue at this point, right?
Yes.
Okay. So potentially, how is that going to be used? You're saying you can use it for what? So you have the lost revenue. The intention is to use it for what?
Our belief is that the way the federal act reads, because it can be used for lost revenue with no other qualification other than the words, and I'm not sure if I'm quoting exactly, but lost revenue is in essence what it says, that once you can establish as a state, as a city, as a village, as a parish, that you have had lost revenue, you can spend it however you deem appropriate. Because you're being compensated for the lost revenue, and whatever you decide is the best use for your particular entity is permissible. That could change if we get some specific guidelines that are more restrictive than that language. Well, then everybody's got to rethink what they can do, and that's what we're all waiting for, is are the guidelines going to try and be more restrictive or more general than what the Act says?
Right, and subject to that guidance, I guess the intent is potentially, so we identify 400 million in lost revenue. So 400 million could be used for infrastructure if we want to use it for infrastructure.
Which is what we're proposing.
That's
That's
what
right.
you're proposing.
Yes, sir.
And theoretically, it could be also used to pay 400 million of the state's obligation for the hurricane storm damage risk reduction system as well.
That's exactly right, which was one of the early discussions we had about using it for that purpose.
Okay, good deal. Let's see, one other question. Representative Cruz wants another bite.
Commissioner Darden, that text you keep referring to is actually right there on page 2. It says, any grant received pursuant to this section combined with any monies received pursuant to Main Street recovery, go on down, shall not exceed the amount of revenue loss experienced by the business during the period provided for in subsection B, which has the dates 2020, basically. So that's exactly it. When I was adding all those numbers you're giving me, I come up with 1.629 billion. I assume you're going to have to trim that portion of yours to stay within the 1.6. Is it even 1.6 that we're talking about?
I think it's 1.629.
Okay.
That's what you're saying.
So the bill has 404.5, and then yours had an additional 825.0. So that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Representative Cruz. That is it for the questions. Thank you, Commissioner. So I'll make a motion to adopt the amendments that were proposed. Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendments? Okay, hearing none, the amendments are adopted. I'd make a motion to report HB 642 as amended. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, HB 642 will be reported as amended. I also make a motion to make HB 642 Special Order Number 1 for Thursday, May 6th. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing none, that motion is approved. I also make a motion to authorize staff to make necessary technical corrections on the adopted amendments. Any objections? Hearing none, that motion is approved. Okay, next up is HB 1. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I also had to do a little housekeeping on that past bill. In favor, HB 62, Roger Block. In favor, Hunter Duke. In favor, Ashley McReynolds. In favor, Kelly Monroe. In favor, Robert Brunet. In favor, Steve Duke. In favor, Carl Carpenter. In favor, Eric Ramstead. In favor, Ron Kruger. And in favor, Kerry Koch. Okay. Okay, members, we'll take up House Bill 1. And, okay. So this is the General Appropriations Bill. The General Appropriation Bill appropriates money for the general operating expenses of state government in the fiscal year 22. As you know, HB 1 and the other budget bills collectively work together to appropriate funding for the operation of state government. The total state budget is $40.2 billion, and House Bill 1 accounts for $34.6 billion of that total. House Bill 1 also accounts for $8.8 billion of the $9.6 billion state general fund in the total state budget. Over the last several weeks, God bless you. Over the last several weeks, we've heard from every agency in the public regarding all aspects of the state budget. The major items already included in the budget are $314 million in savings due to additional enhanced FMAP matching rates to fund services, $56 million in additional funding in higher education going to institutions to cover statewide service costs, increase in faculty pay, and additional funding for specialized institutions, $40 million in additional funding in DOE for pay raises for teachers, that's $400 for teachers and $200 for support staff, and to bring them closer to the southern regional average. $36 million in Department of Corrections to fully fund their personal services, supplies, and offender medical expense needs that typically need to be addressed each year in a supplemental bill, so we're fully funding that. $23 million to fully fund the cost of housing inmates at local facilities. $12 million in additional fund for TOPS, $11 million in additional funding for GO grants. And that's the highlight in the Reader's Digest version of the bill. I'll give you a chance to look at that while we look at some amendments. I'd like to offer some amendments. It's amendment number 2015. If you want to look that up on your computers. So, on the amendments, members, you have a summary of the amendments I'm going to propose. They include funding for $1.4 billion in American Rescue Plan Act dollars mentioned earlier, including $612 million in funds to be distributed to the smaller municipalities throughout the state, $400 million paid to the Unemployment Compensation Fund, $300 million to help address clean water needs, $90 million for broadband, $10 million for loggers relief, $4.5 billion for movie theaters relief. An additional $282 million in federal COVID funding from various federal relief packages infused into the budget for COVID-19 initiatives, largely in the Department of Health. Additional funding to double teacher pay raises initially contemplated in the budget, bringing the total to $800 for teachers, $800 for teachers, and $400 for support staff. It is our goal to utilize additional funds from REC if they recognize an additional funds to work toward getting the 1,000 per teacher pay raise. That's going to be subject to REC recognizing additional dollars. But right now we have 800 built in for teachers' pay raises. Also, the Board of Regents shared their funding formula and other distribution adjustments, and you will see the funding for each institution based on those recommendations once the bill is engrossed. An additional $6 million with an associated federal match to increase the rates our foster parents receive to care for one of our most vulnerable populations. Funding for an additional 500 community choice waiver slots. Additional funding to expand the capabilities to educate and train Louisiana nurses to help address our nursing shortage. An additional $15 million from the State Emergency Response Fund to assist in GOSEP's disaster response. As a measure of good fiscal policy, we are also able to reduce dollars in fiscal year 22 by utilizing the excess in the current year to pay off vehicles and equipment that were financed throughout the state. Also regarding the federal COVID relief, to give members and the public a clearer picture of our state budget and all the federal relief dollars that has increased the size of the budget, I'm proposing within this amendment set to break out the federal COVID-19 funding into a separate section within agencies' budgets. And I want to thank the Division of Administration. We're working with staff to help identify all those federal monies in the budget, and appreciate you guys. I know Travis and Barb and you guys worked hard. Appreciate that. Members, I want to give you some time to look over the amendments, and with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions. Okay, first question is from Representative Miguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't get a chance to read through everything, but I'll start with a few questions that I have from your presentation. So tell me, pay increases in the budget. How much pay increases do we have across the different areas? Higher ed, state employees, teachers, corrections, and anyone else I'm forgetting?
Okay, so we have, with the pay raises, it's going to be the 800 for school teachers, 80 for teachers, 20 for higher ed, and about 23 throughout the rest of the state government for market adjustments for the merit increases based upon civil service requirements.
And how much is the fiscal note on the teacher pay raise? At the 800?
There is no note. But it was identified within the formula for the first 40, and we've identified we could fully fund the formula with $5 million additional dollars, of which we did, which then made the additional 40 requests that they had for services available to be applied, and that's what we did. We applied it to get that $800 million per teacher.
So their initial request was for the recommendation was $400 per year for teachers.
Yes,
and that was about a $40 million fiscal note. That came into the formula, and then we're requiring them, or they came up on their own to find the money within their current formula to fund the first part of the pay raise. So we're doubling that to 800 with the initial 40 that they had requested.
That was going to services and other educational components within the formula.
Where do you know any specifics on that 35 million, where they're finding those dollars within their current budgets, how they're coming up with that to fund the down payment on the pay raises themselves?
And we can, I don't know if anyone from Bessie is here for the formula, but I think primarily part of it has to do, and I don't want to speak for them, but the numbers of the students, the number count, I think because of the fact they had to make some assumptions and numbers coming back and the numbers weren't as high, but they had to account for some of that. So I think they built some of that into it. That's where some of that money is coming from.
And what I'm getting at, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but are they cutting back in certain areas or backfilling certain areas with any type of one-time money that won't be there next year, where they'll come back to us saying we gave the pay raises, but we don't have enough to run our general operating budget? Do you see any fear of that going forward?
No, sir, no fear. And basically, it was overfunded. And because of the fact that it was overfunded, and also in light of the fact that the Department of Education is getting over $4 billion in relief funding, this was an excellent opportunity that we could utilize these available dollars to support the teachers and give them a much-needed pay raise.
Yeah, I can understand that. So you're confident that we're not creating any kind of budget deficit or gap in their main line of funding?
No, sir.
Going forward.
No, sir.
So you mentioned, back to the original question, 20 million in higher ed, 23 in state employees. And then we have the teacher pay raise fiscal note, which I'm going to put down at around $40 million for the double down. Okay, and then how much we have in corrections?
Well, in corrections, we reduced the request from the original administrative, but that's within, we're going to address that in supplemental, but within this bill.
So, generally, do you have a number roughly across the board of how much we're giving away and giving out in pay increases across state government? Is it $100 million roughly? Is it 80? What is it roughly?
Yeah, the 23, apart from the ones we mentioned for higher education and teacher pay raise, it's 23 across the state in pay raises.
Yeah, well, when you're looking at
we can get,
like all those, like when you add the
that
23 plus the 20 and the 40, that's 40, 50, 60, 70. That's 83 right there. And I think there was one other area. And we didn't get into corrections. But I remember the governor's initial recommendations, he had around 90 to 100 million in increases. Is that roughly the same outside of doubling the teacher pay raise?
No, it wouldn't be from the original request because the governor didn't have 800 million pay raise. So I'd say it was putting in
100
less
million.
than half of what the governor requested overall for raises.
Okay, we are.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me, in this budget, how much, let's go back to last year during COVID and related to this year. How much money did we have in one-time money that we used in one-time revenues that came down, I guess, from the federal government to backfill our budget last year? Is it correct in saying it was around $700 million?
Yeah, it's closer to 9, but I mean, the commissioner is also, he or Travis can answer that specific question as well.
So, and you know what my next question is going to be, Z. It's going to be how much are we using this year, and get an understanding of, can we cover those obligations going forward? And, I know you don't have a crystal ball, wish we did, but that's going to be where the information I want to get from Travis.
Sure.
Good morning, members of the committee. I'm Travis Mcelwain with the State Budget Office. To answer Representative Miguez's question, if you all recall back in the fall where we presented the 5-year every month to the Budget Committee, we were indicating to you guys that there was about a $900 to $1 billion challenge for us as we go into building the FY22 budget. Some of those amounts that make up that $1 billion were $90 million is the use of the rainy day fund. $522 million was use of the coronavirus relief funds that we maximized the use of those for FY21 as we built that budget. And then you had about $75 million from the lottery proceeds fund relative to the MFP. And you had a handful of allocations that were provided in the Department of Health. You had about $25 million in the Medicaid Trust Fund for the elderly. You also had the use of about $200 million from the maximization of the emergency FMAP. That was built into the 21 budget. So if you add up all those various pots, you should get pretty close to $1 billion.
Okay, so where do we sit in this budget? Keeping in mind the FMAP, I think that runs out at the end of the year, about mid-year through the fiscal year.
Yes, sir. It is our understanding that has been, will exhaust in December of 2021.
So, and maybe this question is for the chairman. How much one-time money is in this 22 budget, FY22? We have.
Yeah, just basically what he had mentioned.
Well, that was for last year in this proposed budget.
Well, we're paying for the expenditures. Again, as I appreciated, what we're doing is bridging the gap through this crisis to just cover the expenses that we do have to get us through this fiscal year. So they are using some, but not to the degree of the $900 million. We used much more of the $900 million in recurring expenses than the $720 that's being used this year.
Because we're starting to see REC starting to recognize surpluses. It's our understanding that REC will be meeting here soon, and potentially the word is they may recognize more money.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And again, as you mentioned, we don't have a crystal ball, but all expectations are. But understand, too, in that $900 million last year, CARES Act dollars went to fund recurring expenses. There is no ARPA dollars. As I appreciate it, there are no ARPA dollars being used for recurring expenses. So we're not, last year we had to do that because of the problems that we had. This year, the ARPA dollars, rescue dollars, none of that's being used for recurring expenses.
So as this budget moves through the process, is it your plan as chair, that's going to be, your man in this ship, directing it, that we're going to try to avoid using one-time dollars and look at REC and what they recognize and try to get this thing as close to zero and one-time dollars?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's great to hear.
It.
I appreciate that. So you don't have a specific idea of where it is today? Make $300 million, maybe. I know we still have to wait for REC to meet. Is it substantially less? Is your general answer to this, as it sits today? Because you still have to wait to get more REC dollars to be recognized to achieve that goal.
I can speak to what was the resources that were utilized when we built the executive budget, and that's been testified to multiple times on both committees. And that, of course, is the use of $366 million from the emergency FMAP, $241 million of anticipated emergency FMAP, which is, in essence, keep in mind, though, that's just a maximization of the federal policy. So more federal dollars are being utilized in lieu of the general fund. So you add those two numbers together, it's about $600 million.
Can you tell me the first one was 366
yes,
of
sir.
FMAP, and the second one was what?
It's the same concept. It's just a different time frame of the use of the FMAP. So that's $241 million. And Representative Backup probably gave you a copy of the email that I sent him.
But also understand, too, I think, is every state is receiving that FMAP dollar. And so they're putting it to
understand
and so
that.
we're putting it to make sure that we address some of the deficiencies. But
yeah.
The other resources, about $113 million of the maximization of the lottery proceeds fund. So that gets you to about $700 million.
Okay,
which
so
is
close
$300 million lower than what's built into the current year budget.
And your idea is, Mr. Chairman, that maybe REC may come in and recognize a few $100 million?
Close that gap, yes.
Okay.
And again, in the budget that you'll see, we are not spending any more than what was recognized. And again, REC recognized and we utilized the more conservative number of the recommendation. So in our budget, we do not spend a dollar more than what was recognized by REC.
Just in general terms, outside of the cash flow side of it, let's talk about the growth of the budget. I see the state general fund looks pretty flat. Would that be accurate from last year?
For the most part, yes, sir.
How are we looking on state effort and overall budget? On how I know we're going to have probably some natural growth. What type of growth is there on the state effort and then the federal side?
Well, understand too, just like in your business or any other business,
No, I'm just asking
expenditures
what it is.
change, but for the most part, it's relatively flat.
Okay.
Apart from the pay raises you mentioned, that's just the increase, but for the most part, it's relatively flat.
What was the overall budget last year?
The existing operating budget for FY21, excluding double counts, total is $36.4 billion.
If you take out the interagency transfers.
Yes, I took that out.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So that was that's
$36.4 billion. You should always take out the double counts.
And that was this proposed budget or last year?
That was last year. The proposed budget, the executive budget for FY22 is at $36.6 billion. So it's a net increase of $186 million of total. $253 million of that is the general fund. $95 million of that is self-generated. And there's a reduction of $740 $47 million of dedicated funds, and then there's an increase in federal funds of $586 million.
So in general, the budget, I wouldn't consider completely staying still, but it's generally close to what it was before, outside of some of the other things.
Yeah, you had a net change from EOB to executive budget of 0.51%.
And that's equivalent to $186 million?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chairman. I appreciate the information. I'm going to read through. I may have a few questions on details later. So
Sure, please do.
Appreciate
And
it.
understand also that what we've been able to do to build into the budget that you will see in other pieces of legislation, through the funds bill, the supplemental bill, but the $90 million that Travis was referring to for the rainy day fund, we're fully replacing that. So we're going to replace what we used in the rainy day fund for unemployment trust fund. We're also adding $44 million to the UAL. So we're working to reduce that debt and start adding money to the UAL as well. Also, $52 million in state cost share for the disaster expense payments in the future. We're putting that's going to reduce. It's kind of like paying your house note early, and so it's going to help reduce the burden on the state into the future. Another $45 million we put to the HISDRIS, that we're going to have to look at paying $400 million for the state's obligation. We've allocated at least $45 million for the HISDRIS payment, and $38 million in judgments to the state, that also, again, reducing that long-term obligation to the state, paying it off early.
Speaking of long-term obligations, are you going to make any comments on the hurricane, that the project that we have to pay back to the federal government?
That's the HISDRIS. That's what I was talking about.
And how much is that?
It's a $400 million this year, and it's $400 million next year. The negotiated payout was $400 million this year, $400 million next year, and then the third year is about 370 or it's 350, of which can be negotiated for credit, that as the projects are completed and the benefit to the federal government for implementing those projects. We're hoping that our delegation, and I know the administration is working to ensure that we can apply some of that to credit so we can reduce that payout as well. But right now, it's about $1.2 billion, a little over $1.2 billion in terms of the state obligation.
And we plan on making the $400 million this year?
We're going to work. Well, we're going to have to. Okay. We're going to work it in there.
And Travis, what's the balance of our rainy day fund right now?
I believe it's. Hold on.
And how much you putting in, Mr. Chair? You said
90. Yeah, it's a little over $500 million. I'll get you the exact number.
And Mr. Chair,
and that includes the 90 that we're putting back in there.
90. Okay.
Yeah. Not yet. It doesn't include it yet. So we're within what you'll see through supplemental and the funds bill. We're adding another 90 to that.
I believe the balance, the excess of $500 million is in. I'm picking that number up. I'll double check for you.
So we're at about 500 now, and you're going to put 90 more in with this budget.
Well, we're going to confirm that with Travis, but the intent is to restore the 90 that we had taken out for the unemployment insurance and restoring that.
It's $546 million, and that includes the portion of the FY20 surplus amount that you're referring to that has to get deposited per the Constitution.
And so with that, we're going to put 20 more into it to complete that 90, because I think what he was referring doesn't get it to that 90. The additional 20 gets it to the total 90 to the restore what was put in, was used.
Mr. Chairman, you've made some progress, because didn't that how low did we get our rainy day fund at one point? Wasn't it $200 or $300 million?
After in FY18, the balance was $287 million.
Well, it's important that the public knows that this legislature is working towards building that rainy day fund back up, and we are digging out of a hole, right, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And you'll see that in the funds bill when we get to that bill as well. Let's see. First question is, the second question is from Representative McFarland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So go back to the Department of Education. We was talking about the teacher pay raises. Did you account for the 1.375 increase that they requested? When there was they gave a percentage of money they were asking for each district. Was that accounted for in any additional request?
So you're talking about specifically for the teachers or for the corrections, or all increases in pay raise?
No, well, it wasn't necessarily an increase in teacher pay raise. It was 1.375. It would have been divided up amongst the school board districts.
Uh-huh.
Was that accounted for in any increase?
No, that's not part of that.
Okay.
So you're talking about some of the CARES Act dollars and monies that they
no,
were getting?
this is
just the instructional dollars
right.
that they had.
Yeah, so when Bessie had met, they went from 40 million to 80 million, but part of that additional increase was the 1.375 for each.
Yeah, and that's not in there.
Okay. Next question on Amendment 39 for the Wildlife Suppression Subfund for Department of Ag. That is eliminating 14 TOs that was added last year. That was taking money from a stat debt that is created by self-generated revenue. It's actually a tax that landowners put on themselves for fire protection. This was done in light of the hurricanes and the amount of potential for forest fires.
And it was just the reduction of the TOs that he was asking for, the funding for that. Because they're getting the additional money that they had from the tax.
Yeah, but didn't you, as I appreciate it, it's my understanding that we reduced the 14 TOs.
Reduce the money for those TOs, yes.
But they're in the middle of hiring those individuals now.
Well, we need to consider that.
Okay. I'll defer for now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next question is Representative Wheat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Help me out here. There was a request from the community providers for $35.5 million to address the gap in funding and rate increases for restoration from, I think it was maybe back in the early 2000s. Is that provided for in the budget?
No, sir, that wasn't included. And primarily, I guess to Representative Miguez's point in terms of not increasing recurring dollars, that was going to be $35 million in recurring dollars, and though some of it was going to be paid out of the Now Fund is going to run out, and so that would have resulted in a $35 million per year recurring expense. And so it wasn't included. Although, in no way it suggests not the need or the benefit of providing those funds. We were trying to, as best we can within the funding that we do have, hold down recurring expenses as much as possible.
Yeah, I completely understand that argument, Mr. Chairman. Is there any one-time monies that could be allocated to at least have some address of that shortage?
We can look into that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Let's see. Representative Miller.
Not in here.
Okay, he lost his chance. Let's see. Representative Marcel.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, on line, it's amendment number 17. You provided, however, that the funds appropriated for emergency rental assistance program not exceed the 7.2. What is that dollar amount? Do you know? On amendment number 17, what's the dollar amount that's going to the emergency rental assistance program?
Yeah, we don't have that number yet. That was just the cap set at 7.2.
That's just the
so
cap?
We don't have that number.
So
right.
we don't know how many dollars are going to flow to that program?
Not yet. No, ma'am.
Okay, and so the other question that I
The
have.
$100 million right in there now, and I think there's additional, and that cap applies to it, and there's also going to be some additional rental assistance.
So
money as well.
so the cap applies to the $100 million we already have, plus the additional dollars that are going to flow to that program,
Yes, ma'am.
and all they can charge us 7.2%. The administration fees.
Yeah, 7.2 at 300 million is a pretty substantial
No,
amount.
I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's not. I appreciate the cap.
Yeah, and that's
I
for
certainly
next year.
appreciate the
We have
cap.
some for
I know
this
there
year.
was some discussion about what that number would be when we met before. I think I'm gonna have to come back because I lost
and
my
that is
point.
in line with the joint budget recommendation as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
The 7.2.
The 7.2, right, we discussed it at joint budget, right? Are we on amendment number 40? The economic development matching grant. How do we derive?
So that's just so they could receive the same dollars that they were allocated this year. It's just making it consistent in next year's budget.
That's all it's doing.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's not giving them any additional dollars here.
No, ma'am, just what they got this year.
I'd like to give them some additional dollars.
You can't do that.
I just want to say that for the record.
That's great. Well, fine.
Thank you.
Okay. Appreciate that. I'm sure they appreciate that too. Okay, next question.
You cannot do that. I want to.
We have no other questions.
I like economic.
Where's that? Where's my little sheet? All right. Okay. Okay, members, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the amendments. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, the amendments are adopted. Okay, we have another set of amendments. Representative Cruz has some amendments. Okay, hang on, members. We're going to try to get that number so you can look it up. 1931. Okay, members, it's 1931 if you want to pull up the amendment. Representative Cruz, would you like to explain your amendment?
Yeah, this set of amendments, members, eliminates funding to the Office of Charitable Gaming. That's a $2.3 million a year entity. It survives on fees and self-generated revenue. But as discussed during the budget presentations, those 20 positions could be absorbed into over 90 positions that are presently available in the Department of Revenue, and it would also save the citizens $2.35 million in the fees that they pay to conduct raffles and just various charitable enterprises to raise money for organizations.
And I believe that resides in the Department of Revenue.
It does.
Okay, have you had discussions with the Department of Revenue just to get...
None other than at the table for the past 2 years.
Okay. Okay, are there any questions for Representative Cruz regarding his amendment? Wait, we do have a question. Representative Lyons.
I'm just trying to get clarity on that. So this removes it?
Hang on, let me get you in here. Let me join you up. Okay. Okay, Representative Cruz.
It removes funding. It doesn't technically remove the department, but it removes their funding. And like I spoke with the Department of Revenue chair there, that those positions are available in the Department of Revenue. I just saw that most organizations don't even know that they need to register their games when they're charitable. And so I don't see the purpose for that, because several others that do are paying thousands of dollars each year to conduct fundraising activities.
So you're removing the funding for open positions?
For the 20 positions that the Office of Charitable Gaming has FTEs in now.
Okay.
And I'm just saying those could be absorbed by the Department of Revenue because they have over 90 open positions currently.
Oh, okay. So you've absorbed another department.
So my idea is those people can still have jobs within the Department of Revenue. I just didn't see a purpose for the Office of Charitable Gaming. That's $2.5 million, $2.35 million that the citizens could keep in their pockets when they're raising money.
So where's the money going? Back to the general fund?
No, it's fees and self-generated revenue, so there just won't be those fees collected anymore.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Representative Lyons. We have Representative Marcel.
Thank you. Are you saying that the positions in gaming that they're using to regulate bingo are not needed?
That's correct.
And so you're going to take those positions and put them where?
They can fold back into the Department of Revenue. They have 90 open spots, and they only use 20 right now for this Office of Charitable Gaming.
And what are they doing with those positions in the Office of Charitable Gaming? Are you saying that they're not doing anything, or they're just not
They're
needed?
doing stuff.
What are
It's
they
just
doing?
that department. Well, they're collecting forms and watching people that are running gaming for charitable enterprises. I'm just saying the citizens of Louisiana largely don't even know they have to register their games, and they're trying to raise money, and this is a drain on doing that.
And so now, if you remove those positions, then who would be overseeing those things that they're currently doing?
Nobody would. It
Nobody.
would no longer
So it's
be.
not necessary.
That's correct.
Okay. And have you spoken to the department about it?
Only at the table here.
Only at the table. Is anybody here to talk about it today? No? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Other questions? Representative Freeman, did you have a question? Okay, hang on. Oh, wait, you can't load the amendment. You're looking at it. Okay. Hold on. Let's see. I'm going to print you a copy, Representative.
It's not.
It's not in the folder because it just came up. You don't see it on, so we'll print some copies out for everyone. I'm sorry. Clarification. It looks like I got saddled with the amendment. It's under my name and not Representative Cruz's. So that's where the problem is, I think. Right.
It's a committee amendment.
It is not a chairman's amendment. I just want you to know I neither endorse nor approve, although it's just out there. Yep. It really is Representative Cruz's amendment. Y'all got it now? Okay. Do you have a question now? Let's see. Representative Freeman.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to clarify, this is Representative Cruz's amendment, but it was posted incorrectly online?
So this is the Appropriations Committee, and I'm the chairman. It's a committee amendment, so it's under my name, but it's really, yes.
I understand. Okay, so now I do have a question for you, Representative Cruz, just following up kind of on what Representative Marcel was saying. What will happen if none of these people exist? How will this be monitored by the state?
It won't be anymore.
That's what I thought I heard you say.
It's a legal activity, so I didn't see the need to regulate a legal activity.
Well, we regulate a lot of legal activities in the state. That's what the state's job is. We make the laws and they regulate.
I'm trying to make
I
it easier.
I personally have a bit of an issue with us taking jobs out. It doesn't sound like there was any discussion with Secretary Robinson. So I have an objection to this amendment. It doesn't seem like it's all. I understand you've been on this for a few years, and I'm new to this Appropriations Committee, but I have an objection to us putting an amendment on without discussion with the Department of Revenue.
I can understand that.
Any other questions on Representative Cruz's amendment? Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, you were, okay. Okay, there are no other questions. Representative Cruz has offered the amendment. Representative Freeman has objected. So with that, we will take a call. We'll call roll. Okay, clarifying for the vote. So a vote, the motion was made to object? To adopt, no, Representative Cruz made, and then she objected. So the motion is to adopt. So if you vote for, you're voting for Representative Cruz's amendment. If you vote no, you're opposed to the amendment. Everybody clear? Good deal. Okay. Katie, please call the roll.
Representative Adams. Yes. Representative Bacala. Yes. Representative Carpenter. No. Representative Carrier. Yes. Representative Carter. Representative Cruz. Yes. Representative Desatel. Yes. Representative Dubuisson. Yes. Representative Edmonds. Yes. Representative Freeman. No. Representative Harris. Representative Ilg. No. Representative Jones. Representative Jones? Yes. Representative Kerner. No. Representative Lyons. No. Representative McGee. Representative Marcel. No. Representative McFarland.
Yes.
Yes. Representative Miguez. Yes. Representative Miller. Representative Romero? Yes. Representative Thompson? Yes. Representative Turner? Representative Wheat? Yes. Representative Zarang?
Yes.
Yes. 14 yea, 6 nay.
Okay, we have another set of amendments. It's Amendment Set 2061 from Representative Bacala. Okay, Representative Bacala, on your amendment. Hang on, let me get your button there. Okay, Representative Bacala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize, members. This amendment is just being introduced now. I didn't realize that it was omitted in the current form. Last year, this committee passed this amendment, and it was part of Act 1 of 2020, so it existed in the budget. You may recall that two agencies came before JLCB to ask to transfer money into their salaries and salaries for TOs. And JLCB was tasked with the responsibility of deciding if we wanted money reallocated into salaries. So what we're doing with this amendment is simply reinserting into Act 1 or the HB1 language that was in Act 1 and that we passed out of this committee last year. I think it was on page 4 of Act 1 of last year, lines 6 through 17. And again, it's just oversight of any agency who might wish to move money from one purpose to the purpose of salaries or vice versa out of salaries. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Bacala. I have a question from Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Bacala, thank you for bringing this again. I appreciated it last year on joint budget because it gave us more oversight and discussion on certain agencies. And so at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, I move favorably.
Okay, thank you, Representative Freeman. There are no other questions on the amendment. Representative Freeman has made a motion to move favorably. Is there any objection to that motion? Do you want to speak on it?
Yes.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Jay Darden, Commissioner. I just want to ask you not to include this in the budget again. To be frank, I believe this particular language represents an overreach of the legislative branch into the executive branch. Requiring prior approval of any of these types of moves impedes the ability of the administration to do what the administration is supposed to do in enacting the budget. I understand the purpose of it. I certainly understand the reporting component. We have no objection whatsoever to that. We had also asked, just so you know, that to take this out in the supplemental bill because it's going to create some confusion. I'm going to let Travis give you the details because it is a little confusing, and I want him to explain clearly the problem it may pose to the current year budget when the legislature adjourns and we have a little time left in the current fiscal year, how that's going to impact it.
So as we go through the fiscal year, there are certain times in the year where agencies have a need that requires this movement of resources from one expenditure category to the next. As Representative Bacala testified to earlier, there were 2 instances so far this fiscal year that resulted in coming before the committee to make this request pursuant to the language that's in the preamble. As we get closer to the end of this fiscal year, there will be a handful of more of those items that will be part of the process by which agencies will be able to respond to events as they finish their books relative to the current year. So in the event that our proposed amendment on the supplemental bill side, which is in essence to remove this from the current year, could necessitate budget committee actions after June 10th as we get closer to the June 30th deadline for the state's close of the year. So we would just request that this language not be considered for 22 and as well as be amended out in the current year to allow the managers to manage their budgets as they see fit from now until the end of the fiscal year. That would not necessarily necessitate a budget committee action after session adjourns.
And one of the factors here, and Travis, correct me if I misstate this, but we have programmatic budgeting that we have in the state, and so you approve based upon particular programs. But there are times during the year, obviously, where there's a need that's in a different program that, from a managerial standpoint, the people who are involved believe that money needs to be moved somewhere else, and that's one of the reasons why this prior approval concept creates some concern for us.
Yes.
Okay, we have a question from Representative Edmonds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Travis, I think what the interest here is that what we desire is HB1 to look as much like HB1 after July 1st as it did prior. And I think over our 6 years, what we have seen is that I recognize this can be at moments a bit bumpy, but I think it gives us the true picture that what we are approving remains what we approve. And I think that is, although, again, I think this gives us a good opportunity to work even better together. So I certainly hope that you'll understand what I think we have investigated, looked through, and just trying to do our task in order to do that.
And I understand the perspective and the position in terms of what you're getting at, but just keep in mind that the decisions that are being made, the decisions that the administration is making, the decisions that you all are making as appropriators of these funds are as of the information you have today. That information changes constantly. It's the quote of Mike Tyson, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth, and every month they get punched in the mouth and have to respond to it. And as we get closer to the end of that fiscal year, that's when those other decisions are made. And speaking to, we can certainly report that information to you. In fact, your staff has access to all that information. Keep in mind, though, the administration has a policy in terms of whenever agencies want to move monies in and out of the personal services category, we scrutinize that at the division. We scrutinize that inside the Office of Planning and Budget because we share that same belief that, no, these are the allocations that were made. You need to come with us for a good reason as to why you feel it's necessary to move money in or move money out. We all have to understand what that's about. And there are multiple times where we tell agencies, no, we're not going to do that, right? We're not going to do that. So that certainly is an internal conversation that has occurred. Our issue with this is just speaking purely from an administrative perspective. You all adjourned June 10th, and I can tell you right now there's going to be requests for movements that will necessitate a budget committee action between June 10th and June 30th.
I do understand, and I think you know that I've met on multiple occasions, and I'm certainly in favor of a smooth transition when things have to change. However, Mr. Chairman and members, I do think that this gives us opportunity for a good level of transparency, and I do think Joint Budget does their utmost to try to make certain that we listen carefully and to try to join alongside, and the legislature feels like that they have the opportunity to have a better input, and I think that's the purpose of this. And so I hope our colleagues will continue to work, and what we did last year will move in this direction again. Thank you, Travis. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Edmonds. Representative Bacala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mcelwain and Commissioner Darden, apparently y'all already know where this is going, what money you need to move to make the end of the year look right now. And right now is May, I think. We're May now. There's nothing to prevent you from right now. I mean, you were talking about, having to do something at the end of the year, but apparently you already know what you need to do. You could come to the next JLCB and get it done before the end of the year to avoid any complications. And look, this is just about making sure that a budget is a budget and that allocations that the legislature make are held true toward the end of the year. And I think in past year, I'd like to see this happen for 2 years in a row so we can get a feel for if it's necessary. And the 2-year mark is, we're going to learn something in this fiscal year, and I'd like to be able to apply those rules in next fiscal year. So certainly we don't want to be impeding your ability to function as the executive branch, but at the same time, I don't want to surrender our budgetary oversight when we have the mechanism in place to address these things, which is the BA7, and I think most of the time the BA7s, we have not disapproved one of these yet. We've had two. We've delayed one. But if you come to JLCB next month or this month, and we can address this year's issues. I think. I mean, I think we want to work together on it.
I know I've been made aware of potentially a handful but these are just conversations that have just started because the agencies are now starting to they're trying to plan for finishing out the year.
In that handful, would you have an idea of how many dollars are planned to be moved into or out of the salary category?
I have not. It's a preliminary conversation.
Is the preliminary conversation primarily moving money out of salaries or into salaries?
It is both situations.
And I think in the terms of moving money out of the salaries category, it's a conversation we've had for the last 4 or 5 years about funding vacant positions and then using that money for other purposes, which in time may be a good thing. I probably will be good with that. But in either case, we're either talking about the unfunded vacancies being used as a method to, find funding for other sources, or, we're talking about growing the employee size of the salaries on the backs of programs that maybe the legislature, we like Program X. We put money into Program X because it's Program X, but now it's going to be shifted to salary. So, again, I think I do like the idea that we work together on these things through the BA7 process, and I do think it's not going to be onerous because we can handle anything that you anticipate through the end of the year now. Thank you, Mr. Y'all can respond. I'm sorry.
We're going to continue to work with you no matter what you do, obviously, and we just need to raise the point that this, in our view, it is impeding some of our ability to handle what is an executive branch determination. And for example, in the current year, and I just make this point, remember a year ago we were very concerned about what would happen pandemic-wise, and I was giving reports monthly as to what we would do about cutting the budget, and so people were withholding taking certain action because we made them do that, and we made them be careful, and then here we're in a situation where we did not have that eventuality, and so now there are some movements that have to be made appropriately within the budget with our very careful scrutiny and approval. But I understand this is not the be all and end all and make it or break it of the budget, but I feel like I have to make this point to you.
I think the last point I'll make it helps us budget if we know how much you actually spent, in the past years as opposed to what we budgeted. It lets us build better budgets in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Bacala. Representative Marcel.
Thank you. Representative Bacala, I know we've discussed this at length before, and I was concerned about it originally, and I'm still concerned about it. I think it would impede the process of the administration to make the necessary changes that they would need to make when joint budget is not meeting. It would cause us to maybe come in when it would be difficult for us to come in, depending on whatever emergency that would be occurring. I just don't see fixing a problem that does not exist. I think that what's happening currently is working, and I don't believe in changing something just to change it. So at the proper time, I would love to object to this amendment, and those are my reasons. I don't think it's broken, and if something has happened that you feel is broken, I really would like to know what that is, because they have brought everything to us, BA7s, as you already mentioned yourself. If that's the process now, why do we need to fix it? It's not broken. I think it's working, and I don't want to hinder the administration from making the necessary changes mid-year after we leave here, and I don't want to see us have to come back for something that they could do administratively. Thank you.
And to address your concerns, Representative Bacala.
Yes, ma'am. Representative Marcel, it's kind of, if what we're doing now is not broken, then leaving this in is leaving things in, because this is the way it is this year. So we are proposing to leave things as they are, not to change them. And Mr. Chair, at the appropriate, now I'll make a substitute motion to move favorable.
Okay.
I thought you were unfavorable. Unfavorable. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right. So,
Mr.
yeah,
Chair, if
and
I'm mistaken, I thought you made a motion.
She
to
did, but she's
object.
not here, so we will honor your substitute motion for favorable. Representative Marcel has objected, so we will take a vote. Members, again, if you vote in favor, you're voting for Representative Bacalau's amendment. Vote no as against. So with that, Ms. Katie, if you'd please call the roll.
Representative Adams. Yes. Representative Bacala. Yes. Representative Carpenter. No. Representative Carrier. Yes. Representative Carter. No. Representative Cruz. Yes. Representative Desatel. Yes. Representative Dubuisson. Yes. Representative Edmonds. Yes. Representative Freeman. Representative Harris. Yes. Representative Ilg. Yes. Representative Jones. No. Representative Kerner. Yes. Yes. Representative Lyons. No. Representative McGee. Representative Marcel. No. Representative McFarland.
Yes.
Yes. Representative Miguez. Yes. Representative Miller. No. Representative Romero. Representative Thompson. Representative Turner. Yes. Representative Wheat. Yes. Representative Zarang. Yes. 15 yea, 6 nay.
Okay, that amendment is adopted. I think we have another amendment? Yes. Which one is it? Amendment number 2055 on the amendment hit parade. We got amendment from, who's this one from? It's a surprise. Representative McFarland has made an amendment. Representative McFarland, would you like to discuss your amendment?
You can go ahead and pass it favorably. Look, this amendment simply authorizes us to utilize the funds out of statutory dedicated funds for the Wildlife Suppression Fund. It's not taking any money out of the state general fund.
Thank you, Representative McFarland. Is there any questions in regard to that amendment? Hearing or seeing none. Any objection to that amendment? Hearing or seeing none, that amendment is adopted. Okay, members, there is no other amendment. I would make a motion to report HB1 as amended. Is there any objection to moving HB1 forward?
Yeah, I got on.
Okay, no objection. So HB1 will be reported as amended. I'd like to make a motion that HB1 be made special order number 2 for Thursday, May 6th. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, that motion is adopted. I'd also like to make a motion for staff to make necessary technical corrections to the adopted amendments. Any objection? No objection. That motion is adopted. Okay, next, members, we will do the supplemental bill. That's 516, the supplemental bill. Oh, sorry, again, I just want to do a little housekeeping on HB1. Opposed is Ashley McReynolds from Arc of Louisiana. Also opposed Kelly Moore from the Arc of Louisiana. Okay. Oh, and we had 23 emailed comments on HB1. You can see those online if you'd like to view those. And they were emailed to you all last night. Okay, HB 516, supplemental bill. Okay, members, HB 516 appropriates money for expenses in the current fiscal year, 2021. The supplemental bill, as it was introduced, appropriated no state general fund monies outside of the $27 million of surplus funds from fiscal year 2019 and fiscal year 19 and 20 that we are required by the Constitution to appropriate to the initial unfunded accrued liability, to the lasers, and teachers' retirement systems. The amendment we are proposing today would make $84.7 million in reductions from the state general fund savings and utilize most of the $292.4 million excess funding recognized by REC in January. The major new general fund expenditures include $52 million for disaster expenses and needed state cost share, $45 million toward the payment due for the HSDRS, the Hurricane Storm Damage Risk Reduction System in and around New Orleans, that obligation that we have, $38 million for judgments, $33 million for agencies to fund projected expenses, $27.4 million for local housing, $17 million for the retirement UAL obligation, and other funding for specific agency needs, including elections, judiciary, LWIN, dredging, and more. It also reduces funding by $76 million from the Lottery Proceeds Fund to right-size the MFP formula. This funding, along with $366 million from the MADF, is being utilized in the fiscal year 22 budget in HB1. Additionally, what's left of the hospital MFP model is removed from the current year's budget. There are also many other amendments outside of the state general fund adjusting other means of finance, and you have a one-page summary of the total changes in funding by department for all means of finance. And with that, members, I'd be happy to address any questions. Okay, Representative Miller, I know you have a question, but would you want to, we can introduce the amendments and then discuss that as well, or you have a question before we work on the amendments? Okay. With that, we have a set of amendments. It's amendment set 2031, and it's available online. Okay, now we'll go to questions. Representative Miller.
My question was the chart of HB 516 supplemental appropriations. Am I looking correctly at we're giving the Department of Corrections some of these funds?
Yes, we are.
So when they came in front of us, and I'm glad the commissioner's up here, maybe he can answer. When they came in front of us weeks ago, we questioned about how much money they were putting in the system to update it to make sure prisoners were released on time. And they also had a lot of unspended authority from the previous years that they hadn't funded. We also funded them in HB1. We made them whole so we wouldn't have to do this in the previous year. So if you can just give me an explanation, or in the upcoming years, why are we funding them any of these funds if in our current budget we're making them whole?
Go ahead, Travis.
President Miller, this centers from the fact that when we started the fiscal year, local housing and corrections had some budget challenges. So the idea was, let's go ahead and take care of that challenge in 22, but we still have to take care of them in 21, which is what is reflected in our proposed amendments to the committee, which was the information that we reported to you all for a fiscal status statement.
But the challenges they had, didn't they get CARES Act funds?
They did, but if you recall, in maximizing the use of the CARES Act dollars, we spent the CARES Act dollars on eligible coronavirus relief fund items, but their general fund was reduced as a result
What
of
about
that.
the unspended excess authority that they had from the previous years in their budget? They've never maximized all the use of the budgeted money that we gave them.
I don't recall that being the case with the Department of Corrections. They traditionally spend all the I'm only speaking to the general fund. They traditionally spend all the general funds that they have, and they rarely revert any general fund at the end of the fiscal year.
Well, their administrator testified when he was here that they definitely had unused money that they hadn't spent. But I guess what I'm really getting to is, what are we doing as far as upgrading their system? They continue to ask for money, but they never take a focus on upgrading this computer system. To me, it's priority. So I would ask the commissioner, since the Department of Corrections is not here, I'm sure, what are we doing about this system that's outdated?
We are investing in the offender management system. That is certainly something that's out there. That's definitely a project that the administration and the department are working together to, if that's what you're speaking to, that is something that is currently being worked on, and they're working with OTS on that specific project.
So when we speak on work on, is the problem going to be resolved? Because this look like, I'm just looking at it roughly, I don't know, $20 million that we're giving them, and it's probably not the exact money that we're giving them in supplemental payments, and nothing here says that it's going to the computer software system to fix the issue.
And that's half of what was requested too. Just want to point that out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But we have ongoing litigation right now in the court system about this system we have. So, if can Commissioner Darden, maybe can you tell me what are we doing as far as this outdated system?
I can't tell you right now because I don't know. I mean, we'll certainly find out. We'll have to get the department to address it specifically, and I'm trying to look through the amendment and find out if the language in the amendment is broad enough to include that purpose, or whether it's limited to some other purposes. As the chairman notes, we had requested putting more than this into corrections in the supplemental budget to address a number of the problems they've raised with us over the course of the year. So I just don't know, but we'll certainly find out for you.
Secretary LeBlanc seems to, this is not to be on his priority. It's just really not. So I would ask if you can get with him and please present with us what is his plan. And I know publicly he might not like to speak on it due to the lawsuit, but he continues to ask for more and more money for the Department of Corrections. They come here every year for supplemental funding, but never do he address the issue with the computer system. And if he can't give us a solution, maybe we'll get with our colleague Rep. Desertel and he'll figure it out for us. But thank you, Mr. Chairman. He probably can do it for cheaper.
Thank you, Representative Miller. Let's see, there are no other questions. The amendment, okay. With that, I would offer the amendments. Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendments? Hearing or seeing none, the amendments are adopted. Okay, members, are there any other questions in regard to the supplemental bill?
Mr. Chairman, if I may just make a couple of comments. One thing I want to bring to your attention, and we obviously we haven't had a chance to look through the lengthy set of amendments in terms of exactly what's in and what's out, but I do note there are a huge number of amendments to particularly local projects and what have you. The one thing I want to mention that I don't think is in here that is important that you need to be aware of, we had recommended $20 million to the Office of Risk Management for insured obligations under Delta, Zeta, and the winter storms. The office has an obligation for a deductible for each one of those storms, and those numbers have not been finalized yet, and obviously claims are being made with FEMA and what have you, but I would be remiss if I didn't make you aware of the fact that we think at some point in time there is going to be a need for this money because only so much is insured, and obviously when there is a deductible, as all of you know, the deductible has to be paid in advance before the payments start being made. So we glanced hurriedly at this. I don't think that's in there, and that's just one thing I wanted in particular to bring to your attention. We'll have an opportunity to review these amendments between now and the floor, and we may very well come to you with some amendments on the floor, but I just want to get that on the record because that's a concern that often is overlooked, and you have all these multiple storms that happen in one year, and all of a sudden you got multiple deductibles, and that's a problem because we don't have the money available within that aspect of the division to make those payments. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, and Commissioner, to that point though, understand and appreciate your concern, but the problem is trying to get additional money, and the reason it wasn't placed in there, they have their own fund balance. They also get premiums, and it's self-funded, and there's going to be additional FEMA dollars. And last year they requested only 20 as well. We tried to get additional information, and we didn't have that, and so that was part of the rationale and necessarily taking it back to get additional information. And so if you want to provide maybe by the floor we could address something and more clarification, we'd be happy to consider that.
No, we absolutely will. I'm sorry you didn't get the information. If you'd let me know, I'd make sure you have it, but we'll get it to you between now and the floor.
Okay, thank you, sir. Seeing no other questions, okay, I'd like to make a motion to report 516 as amended. Is there any objection to that motion? So 516 will be reported as amended. I'd also like to make a motion that House Bill 516 be made special order number 3 for Thursday, May 6. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, that motion is adopted. I'd also like to make a motion for staff to make necessary technical corrections on the adopted amendments. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, that motion is adopted. Next, members, we will move to the judicial bill. That's HB 584. We didn't have any. Okay, members, House Bill 584 is the judicial appropriations for 2021-2022. The Judicial Appropriations Bill appropriates funds for expenses of the Louisiana Judiciary, including the Supreme Court, Courts of Appeal, District Courts, Criminal Court of Orleans Parish, Juvenile and Family Courts, and other courts. The existing budget for the judiciary is $175.8 million, of which $154.5 million is in state general fund. The proposed budget recommendation for fiscal year 22 is $174.1 million, of which $154.5 million is set aside from the state general fund. There is $1.7 million reduction from fiscal year 21 that removes the CARES Act funding. The funding requested by the judiciary for fiscal year 2021 and 22 is $190 million, of which $171.1 million is state general fund. That request is approximately $15 million more in state general fund and $15 million more in total dollars than the current fiscal year. The interagency transfer of TANF funds for the Department of Children and Family Services includes $5.4 million to help fund drug courts and nearly $4 million to fund court-appointed special advocates. And the statutory dedications include $4 million for the Trial Court Case Management Information Fund and $6.2 million from the Judges Supplemental Compensation Fund. The requested increase included the following items: $5 million for staff merit increases and related benefits, $4.5 million increase in mandated items such as judicial salaries, related benefits, and some office expenses, $4.6 million increase for the Supreme Court proper, $977,866 million thousand to expand drug and specialty courts, and $201,000 additional for CASA services. So the amendment, that's basically the bill that's what proposed, and I have an amendment for that bill. What amendment said is it? It's Amendment 1258, if y'all would like to pull it up. So the amendment I'm offering members is to increase the state general fund by $7 million, which is essentially half of the increase from the current operating budget. And that increase would include judicial pay raises as required by statute, elimination of deficits in drug and specialty courts and the FINS program, expands drug and specialty courts, and mandated related benefit increases. And that's also included in Amendments 1 through 6, makes technical corrections for fiscal year 21 of the operating budget. Amendment 7 will reduce the state general fund by $9.6 million from the original state general fund. And Amendments 8 through 10 includes technical amendments to renumber the sections. Okay, members, is there any questions regarding the amendments or the bill? Representative Marcel.
Yes, you refer to the funds for the special courts. Where is that?
It's in the
What
overall.
page? It's in the overall
bill.
It's in the bill itself.
Yes, ma'am.
Not in the amendment.
Not in the amendments, but it's
Okay.
allocating the dollars and identifying those critical programs.
Okay. Yes, I served on that committee, and I certainly want to see how many dollars we were giving to them. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I know we're honored to have the presence of the justices here today. And with that, I'd like to recognize Supreme Court Justice John Weimer for comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the Appropriations Committee, including the Speaker Pro Tem. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, did I get the order correct by recognizing both of you before the Speaker Pro Tem? Is that correct? Because one member told me that he should be recognized first.
If not, it'll definitely be recognized, but I can assure you it was fine. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am John Weimer, and I have the honor of serving as the 26th Chief Justice of the Louisiana Supreme Court. I'm joined by Justice Crane, who I'll introduce momentarily, and Brian Wolf, who is now the CFO of the judicial branch. He's a twofer. Y'all know him from working on the budget. Now he is head of the budget and the CFO. He's doing two jobs for one money. I want to begin by thanking each of you for the sacrifices you and your families make to serve our citizens. Judges serve our citizens by applying the principles of impartiality, justice, independence, and adherence to the rule of law as written by the legislature in a manner that ensures all are equal before the law as provided for in our Constitution. Especially during this past year, with so many challenges, judges worked diligently to provide service and discharge duties of their office by quickly adapting to new technologies to ensure our system of justice remain viable. Much of the money that this legislature appropriated to us were used to implement these technologies. Judges' efforts are to be applauded for the way they quickly pivoted. To sit in judgment is truly a formidable duty and a challenging responsibility, because the power of government imparts each individual who appears before, or impacts rather, each individual who appears before our courts in a personal way. A few days ago, I was with Representative Bacala, and there was a courthouse dedication in Ascension Parish. And someone, I believe he trained, is now the sheriff there after his many years of service together. And he said this, and I thought it was profound. I'd like to share it. The courthouse is indeed a temple of justice, where truth is still supreme, fairness is paramount, and judgments are rendered impartially. Many will say that our third branch of government, the judicial branch, on occasion becomes the most important branch. Today's political climate measures the political winds as they change hour by hour, and there is only a slight chance for serious debate, and with only isolated moments of compromise. We more than ever rely on the judicial branch to be the armada that anchors us into the wind in the weather of stormy seas. We are fortunate that judges work hard every day to ensure justice remains blind. And with his permission, I shared those thoughts. You trained him well, Representative. The judiciary has enjoyed a good working relationship with the legislature, which is based on mutual respect and the concept of comity. I believe our branches have worked together because we respect the role of the branch, which makes the laws and writes the laws of our state. The judiciary discharges the core functions of our democracy by resolving disputes and adjudicating criminal and juvenile matters. But also, the judiciary serves as one of a very small number of Supreme Courts nationwide which administer 4 significant programs, including drug and treatment court programs, which further include reentry courts and veterans courts and mental health courts and family preservation courts. The judiciary also administers the CASA program, which involves dedicated, extraordinary citizens helping among the most vulnerable in society, abused and neglected children who are caught up in our legal system. I know the legislature recently gave the volunteers who were here a standing ovation, and I can't begin to tell you how much they sincerely appreciated what that meant to them. The court also administers the FINS, or Families in Need of Services program, which intervenes and helps provide service to youthful status offenders such as runaways, ungovernables, and truants, so they do not become embroiled in the criminal justice system. The Supreme Court also administers the Louisiana Protective Order Registry. We have far too many victims of domestic violence in Louisiana, and this Protective Order Registry aids them immensely. These programs, I would suggest, by any measure, the funding of those is an investment, because these programs save millions of dollars in the areas of corrections and health care annually while providing valuable services. I respectfully ask for your favorable consideration of the budgetary requests of the judiciary and appreciate all of the courtesies that you extend to the judiciary. Proper funding will enable the judiciary to discharge its constitutional obligations and maintain these programs. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Justice Will Crane, who will address the judicial budgetary issues. Justice Crane has been on the court for a year and a few months after serving as a distinguished district court and appellate court judge. Since he's been with the court, he has basically only known the pandemic. He and I both had the opportunity in our younger years to work for the legislature. He was an assistant to the Honorable B.B. 60 Rayburn, a senator from Bogalusa. Justice Crane, to you.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee, what a pleasure to be here today and appreciate the opportunity to present. They've identified me as the COVID justice. I've said that with in the past year, by linking me back to Senator Rayburn, I have been linked back to the Stone Ages and branded with the scourge of a worldwide pandemic, so there's nowhere to go but up from here. But I did I will tell you, enjoyed my times. I actually technically worked for the Budget Committee. Representative Thompson will remember that. I'm not sure who's more surprised about me being here and seeing you, Representative Thompson, you or I. But those were some great days and enjoyed those, going back a long time. I will be very brief because I know that you may have some questions, but just to give context to our budget. In 2015, the judiciary's budget was $180 million. This past year, fiscal year 21, the judicial budget was $176 million, including CARES Act funding. From 2015 to the present, by adding any growth factor, whether it be the CPI, inflation rates, or otherwise, if you added that to our 2015 budget, we would be in the range of $193 to $195 million. So what we are asking for in our budget and what we are presenting is one that would restore the direct cuts that we have absorbed since that time and up to the present time. In addition to that, there have been several years when we have been or received what was referred to as a standstill budget. I would suggest to you that that is a misnomer with respect to our budget, because we have certain constitutionally mandated obligations with retirement and with health care benefits. So our standstill budget over that time effectively resulted in cuts because we were required to take appropriated funds and fund those increases. So once again, the budget that we have asked for this year of $191 million would restore those cuts and fund those previously unfunded mandates in health care and retirement benefits. I'm going to add a couple of things to the Chief's comments about the past year and the things that we've done. We have made, I believe, tremendous steps, both in the area of efficiencies of our courts as well as transparency. And these are areas that I think the public has been interested in. I know you have been interested in, and I believe we've made progress there. We have created on the efficiency side a technology commission. I know that Representative Dubuisson has helped us in moving forward with an alternative dispute resolution pilot for the East St. Tammany Parish City Court in Slidell. That was generated by the Technology Commission. In addition to that, we have purchased and funded infrastructure increases across the state, as well as created a uniform website for all of our district courts, so that people who access the courts can go online, access those courts by a uniform website, and get the information that they need to interact and interface with our court system. We've also, I believe, made strides in transparency. I know with our Judiciary Commission, We passed new rules last year that have increased the transparency of that process. In fact, we recently had an open public hearing before the Judiciary Commission that before those changes would not have been possible. And there have also been some changes in other areas I know that I've spoken with Representative Harris about some of the transparency in our finance reports and also in campaign finance. So we are making moves in all of these different directions. It goes without saying, but I am compelled to say it. We could not do the things that we do without the support from you, and we appreciate that and the funding that you've provided for us. Be glad to answer any questions, and if I can't answer them, direct them to somebody who possibly can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Justice Crane. Let's see, we have a question from Representative Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Justices, what I would love to have the entire judiciary funded out of the state general fund. If for me, fees and self-generated revenue, I think, kind of perverts the cause of justice a bit. But one of your functions is to regulate the legal profession and promulgate and update the code of judicial conduct. That's probably my biggest concern in the state and the citizens I serve. Is it's this the billboard stuff. I know you hear about it all the time, but I would like to see or know what efforts you're making to make it the honorable profession it is, instead of some of the it's got a bad light lately, and I'm just wondering what is being done within the branch to improve that light.
Want me to address it?
Yeah, you can.
Representative Cruz and many share your concerns. I know that when I was running just a short year and a half ago, that was one of the things that came up often. Was the advertising, and I reminded people that when I practiced law, we probably debated for a year going from regular print to bold print in the yellow pages. So you can see the difference in the levels of advertising. We have done some things this past year with requiring filing of advertising. We have also done some. We have struggled in an area because we went to federal court a number of years ago in the public citizens case. We had comprehensive regulation of lawyer advertising. You can go to our code now, and many of those rules are still there, even though they were declared unconstitutional. That case ended up protecting much of the advertising with First Amendment protection. And as a result of that, we, quite frankly, have been cautious as we've moved back into it because of the restrictions that resulted from the public citizens case. I will tell you we are prepared as a court. I think I speak for our court in saying this, that we are committed to trying to do what we can in the area of lawyer advertising. We understand that one can argue that it has created barriers for opportunity in the state. It has created barriers to economic activity coming to this state. And it has had a corrosive effect on our profession. So we want to work. And I know I've reached out to a number of legislators on this topic. We are prepared to sit down with all of the stakeholders as well as you and try to come up with things that can be done within the confines of the First Amendment and the public citizens case. We are doing that, and we hope to continue to do that. But I just caution that there are some constraints there from the federal courts that have limited our ability to move in a really aggressive way on that end.
I can appreciate that. And when I see justice, what I see is a restoration of relationships. And I think it's kind of out of balance now. And the judgments I see, there's never going to be a relationship restored. There may be some, compensation and some return of what was lost, but I think the relationships are largely lost because the judgments are so out of balance from what people think may be responsible. So I just look forward to working with you. I appreciate you engaging on that subject, and I hope we can move forward on that.
And we're committed to doing that, Representative.
Yeah,
Thank you very
Representative
much.
Cruz, you and I spoke at length about both of your concerns the other day, and the First Amendment, as construed by the federal courts, protects lawyer advertising. There's a Bates case dating back to 1977, and the last time we made some changes, we consulted with constitutional scholars about how to make these changes. And they assured us that what we were doing would pass constitutional muster. Well, the ink wasn't dry on the order changing these rules before we were sued in federal court. And it didn't come out as well as those constitutional scholars promised us it would, unfortunately. And further, unfortunately, if you lose one of those cases, you're facing paying the attorney's fees. So we have to be cautious. We can't make those decisions because those decisions are imposed on us by federal decisions.
Well, we either pay on the beginning or we pay on the end. But right now, largely, Louisiana citizens are losing because of the cost of, as you know, insurance has been the big thing for years. So I'd just like to see if we can do whatever we can to restore that balance a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz.
Thank you, Representative Cruz. There are no further questions. Justice, thank you all for being here. Appreciate you. So Representative Marcel, you had a...
Yes, I do. First of all, I'd like to have a point of personal privilege and recognize my chief judge from Baton Rouge City Court. Is she still here? Judge Yvette Alexander, thank you for being here. That's our chief judge in Baton Rouge City Court. And secondly, I just want to ask you talked about the public citizens case, about the advertisement and the First Amendment rights. You are regulating that industry now, is that right? You all are regulating it now,
Yes.
billboard industry.
Yeah, constitutionally we are. Well, constitutionally we're obligated to regulate the practice of law, and we have to do that within the.
And that's a part of it, correct? So, yes. I mean, an attorney can't just put up any billboard they would like to now without going through a process. Is that correct?
Well, there's a process now
Correct.
that they, and we just amended the rules relative to this to identify and have people have the opportunity to research what ads were approved by.
And did I hear you say that there are some rules on the books that are still there but were ruled unconstitutional? Did I hear that?
We're cleaning those rules up right now. In other words,
how long has that been in place?
Justice Crane?
Excuse me, Representative. What the rules have a notation on them that they were declared unconstitutional, but what we are doing right now is going through and just removing them.
Right, and my question is, how long have those rules been sitting there when we knew it was unconstitutional? That's my question.
4 years, maybe.
4 years?
Yeah.
It took us 4 years to get them off? 4 years?
Well, they were identified as being declared unconstitutional, but simply not taken out of the rules.
Right.
And
okay.
we
and
are
when
in
do
the
we see
process
those
of
being taken out? When are we going to take those out?
They're in the process of being done right now, along with what the chief referred to, the special identifier that will have to go on ads. You are required to pre-file your ads with the bar.
Correct.
And when you file that, there will now be a unique identifier that is attached to every ad, so that someone that sees an ad will know immediately whether in fact it has been pre-filed as required by our rules.
Okay.
So we are imposing that. We are in the process of putting that rule in place, and at the same time doing the cleanup to remove the old rules, so there's no confusion about whether or not those rules are still in application or not.
Right, and I know there was much debate about billboards a couple of sessions ago and what that meant to our industry. I heard him refer to how high cost of insurance. Of course, we did tort reform last year, and we didn't see our insurance go down, so I just want to make sure I put that on the record. That's what we were sold, a bill of goods, that if we were to pass this tort reform that our insurance premiums will go down in Louisiana. I don't know about anybody else's, but I checked mine and it's probably gone up. But thank you anyway for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative Marcel. And I think that's it for questions. And thank you all, Justice. I know there are other several judges as well. Judge Lanier, and Judge Hagan from our region as well. Thank you all. Appreciate y'all coming, and thank you all for what you do. So with that, members, I offer the amendments for HB 584. Is there any objection to the adoption of those amendments? Hearing or seeing none, those amendments are adopted. I would like to make a motion to report HB 54 as amended. 584 as amended. Is there any objection? Representative Bacala, you had a... Well, there's no objection to 584 as amended, so that will go through. I'd also like to make a motion that we make House Bill 584 Special Order Number 7 for Thursday, May 6th. Any objection? Hearing none, that motion is adopted. I also like to make a motion for staff to make necessary technical corrections on the adopted amendments. Is there any objection? Hearing or seeing none, that motion is approved. Thank you, members. Appreciate
Thank you. Thank you for the courtesies extended to us. I realize that this is a process, and we'll keep working with everyone as this matter moves through the process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Justice Weimer. Chief Justice Weimer, I might add. And the Speaker Pro Tem apologized for not getting to hear your speech, but he said he'd be more than willing, if you give him a call, you could repeat it for him.
I'll be glad to. I recently was sworn in as the Chief Justice, and those that spoke at my investiture were given a small token of appreciation, a gift.
Oh, you're going there, huh?
And the chairman was there also, and they handed him the gift that was designed for the bishop. And so he gets down the stairways a ways thinking he's got this gift when one of my employees ran down and took it from him. Now, that guy's no longer working for us anymore.
No, I think he is.
Because I said, listen, the bishop is in the business of forgiveness. He can be forgiven for overlooking you. But the chairman of appropriations, I don't know if he forgives, like as readily as the bishop.
I do, and I'm working on pearls for heaven, and when I found out it was for the bishop, I gladly gave it over. I can promise you.
I understand. But thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all the courtesies extended.
Thank you, sir. Point of Representative Bacala has a personal comment or question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mcelwain and Chairman Darden, just thinking about the conversation we had earlier about the amendment, and your comments that you all anticipated several changes. I think it's important for this committee, and as we debate HB1, to have as much information as possible for us to make good decisions. With that in mind, I would ask that you guys convey to staff any anticipated changes you plan to seek a BA7 for relative to that Section 5D of the current HB1 or Appropriations Act, just so we'll know exactly what changes we expect to see before the end of the year. That's important as we go forward making decisions for next year. So if you could convey that, as soon as possible so that we'll have that information available, I think it could be important in our deliberations on HB1.
Yes, sir. We will certainly do that and get it to you as quickly as we can with everything we know about right now.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Bacala. Okay, members, now we will go to HB 515, the Funds Bill, HB 515. Oh, also, on the last bill, the Judicial Bill, there was one email comment, and that was sent to you all last night, so there was an email comment on the Judicial Bill 584, if you'd like to look at that as well. So we'll take up HB 515, the Funds Bill. Members, HB 515 provides for the transfer, deposit, and use of Treasury funds. As filed, the bill does the following. transfers $68 million of the fiscal year 2019-2020 surplus, which REC has designated as non-recurring, into the Budget Stabilization Fund as the Constitution requires. It transfers $17 million of state general fund excess into the Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries Conservation Fund. It transfers $4.1 million of state general fund excess into the Higher Education Initiatives Fund. It transfers $10 million of state general fund excess into the State Emergency Response Fund. It transfers $7.7 million of state general fund excess into the Major Events Incentive Program sub-fund of the Louisiana Mega Project Development Fund. And it reimburses several funds that were swept a decade ago when the state was in a budget crisis with state general fund excess. That's $508,000 to the Motor Carrier Regulation Fund, $5.4 million to the Utility and Carrier Inspection and Supervision Fund, $658,000 to the Telephonic Solicitation Relief Fund, $5.5 million to the Motor Fuels Underground Storage Tank Trust Fund. And today, members, I'm offering up a set of amendments. That's Amendment Set 1120. Amendment Set 1120, and it basically does the following. It transfers $22.4 million of state general fund excess into the Budget Stabilization Fund. It transfers $5 million to the Voting Technology Fund. It transfers an additional $5 million to the State Emergency Response Fund. And it sweeps remaining CARES Act balances in the Coronavirus Local Recovery Fund, the Main Street Recovery Fund, and the Critical Infrastructure Workers Hazard Pay Rebate Fund into the State Coronavirus Relief Fund so we can get remaining dollars somewhere that they can be put to good use. Okay, members, we have HB 515 up for discussion. Are there any questions? Oh, and also I wanted to mention, I failed to mention that it also makes changes on behalf of the Dedicated Fund Review Subcommittee of JLCB, changing some funds into statutorily dedicated funds account. And I know that's very important. Representative Edmonds has been working on that diligently and put a lot of good work in that. You sure can. Representative Edmonds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate you carrying that for us this year, which basically is the final funds that we've gone through a 4-year cycle, and this is the last ones that move those to fees and stuff generated. So thank you for taking care of us on that.
No problem. Thank you, and thank you for all the hard work that you put in that to get it to this state right now. Okay, members, are there any questions regarding the amendments? Okay, with that, members, I would like to offer the amendments to, yes, I'm sorry. You had a question? Representative Lyons.
Excuse me. Just, can you give me a little brief of the amendment on page 8, going into line 25, that's dealing with the waste tire processor fund? What are we actually doing with that?
Okay, that's
well,
just,
actually, it goes before that. I'm sorry.
It's just turning it into a dedicated fund account is what it does.
So it's moving into a dedicated fund now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Thank you. That's all I want to know now.
Okay, great. Okay. No other question on the amendments, members? With that, I would offer up the amendments. Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendments? Hearing or seeing none, the amendments are adopted. On to the bill. Are there any questions on the bill? Hearing or seeing none, I would make a motion to report HB 515 as amended. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, we will report HB 515 as amended. I'd also like to make a motion that we make HB 515 Special Order number 4 for the Thursday, May 6th. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, that motion is adopted. I'd also like to make a motion for staff to make necessary technical corrections on the adopted amendments. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, that motion is adopted. Okay, members, next up is the ancillary bill. And that is HB 484. 484. Okay, members are good with this? Okay, we'll go to HB 44, the next bill, and the ancillary appropriation bill provides for the ancillary expenses of state government. The bill contains primarily fees and self-generated revenue, statutory dedications, and interagency transfers. The bill does not contain any state general fund direct in fiscal year 22. No state general fund direct in fiscal year 22. Almost two-thirds of the appropriations in the bill are for the Office of Group Benefits, which contains health and life insurance premium payments for participating members throughout Louisiana. The bill, in its current posture, appropriates $707.8 million of interagency transfers, $1.75 billion in fees and self-generated revenue, and $175.3 million of dedicated funds for a total of $2.64 billion. I'd also like to offer up an amendment at this time. It's amendment number 2021. If y'all want to check that out, amendment 2021. And it should be in your folders. Okay, members, amendment 2021, this amendment is to adjust the language amendment that takes up an additional step in fiscal responsibility by requiring OGB to get a third party to look into claims to ensure claims accuracy and reduce overpayments, saving money for OGB and, in turn, its enrollees. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Okay, members, any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, I would make a motion that we adopt the amendments.
Yes.
Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, the amendments are adopted. Are there any questions on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
No, I'm sorry, you can't.
I think I'm a little late because I think it was on the amendment, but I do want to at least.
Well, we can go back if
you'd like. Just
to.
put this on the record if we may. Mr. Couvillon's here to address this, and we just have some concern about the amendment in that it's going to require additional cost on the in the office that they really don't feel is necessary. And I'll let Mr. Couvillon explain.
Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, David Couvillon, CEO of OGB. We currently conduct these type of audits in our office at this moment. In the past 3 years, we've done 14 separate audits, 5 of which are still ongoing. These are both with the PBM and with our ASO, Administrative Services Only contract. 5 of them are still ongoing, and we continue to do this. This amendment may cause us to have to do another contract with another organization, which would necessarily cost us more money, an opportunity to spend something else. So I just wanted to point that out to everyone and let you know.
Thank you, Mr. Couvillon. And I can assure you we'd be happy if there's any issues to address that on the floor if need be. You're saying you may, so if you could provide any additional information, possibly we'll consider that for the floor.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, members, on H, back to the bill, 484. Is there any questions on the bill? Hearing or seeing none, I would make a motion to report HB 484 as amended. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, HB 484 will be reported as amended. I'd also like to make a motion that HB 484 be made special order number 5 for Thursday, May 6th. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, that motion is adopted. I'd also like to make a motion for staff to make necessary technical corrections to the adopted amendments. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, that motion is adopted. Okay, next, members, is House Bill 695, the Legislative Budget Bill. Okay, members, HB 695 is the legislative budget bill. It contains operating expenses for the House, the Senate, Legislative Fiscal Office, Legislative Auditor's Office, Budgetary Control Council, Louisiana State Law Institute. And the original budget includes $74 million in state general fund, $23.8 million in fees and self-generated revenue for the legislative auditor, and $10 million in statutory dedications. I'd also like to offer an amendment. The amendment reduces the amount of state general fund appropriated to the Legislative Auditor's Office to make it consistent with the amount requested and approved by the Legislative Budgetary Control Council. So, members, are there any questions in regard to the amendment I proposed? Hearing or seeing none, I make a motion to adopt amendments, the proposed amendment. Without objection, the amendments are approved. Back to the bill. Any questions on HB 695? Hearing or seeing none, I would make a motion to report HB 695 as amended. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, HB 695 will be reported as amended. I'd also like to make a motion that HB 695 be made special order number 6 for Thursday, May 6th. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, that motion is approved. Next, I'd like to make a motion for staff to make necessary technical corrections on the adopted amendments. Is there any objection? Hearing or seeing none, that motion is adopted. Okay. Okay, members, next bill is House Bill 553, Revenue Sharing. Okay, members, HB 553, Revenue Sharing. Article 7, Section 26 of the Constitution requires that each year at least $90 million be distributed to the parishes solely on the basis of population and the number of homesteads in each parish in proportion to the population and number of homesteads in the state. 80% of the distribution is based on population, 20% on the number of homesteads. The distribution to the parishes appears on pages 41 through 43, and there's no change to the distribution from last year. And I'd also like to offer an amendment, and the amendment will update the parish distributions within fiscal year 22 numbers. And so the amendment simply updates those numbers that you can see if you pull it up and look at it. Okay, members, is there any objection to the adoption of the amendment? Hearing or seeing none, the amendment is adopted. Any questions on HB 553 on the bill? Okay, hearing or seeing none, I'd like to make a motion to report HB 553 as amended. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, that motion, we will report HB 553 as amended. I'd also like to make a motion that House Bill 553 be made special order number 7. I think we're, 9. We're up. No, 8. I'm sorry. Special order number 8 for Thursday, May 6th. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, that motion is approved. Next, I'd like to make a motion for staff to make necessary technical corrections on the adopted amendments. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, that motion is approved. Thank you, members. Next up. Okay, next, members, is HCR 2, the Hospital Stabilization Resolution. Y'all all pulling that up. Okay, members, HCR 2 by the Speaker is our annual resolution on behalf of the Louisiana Hospital Association. We renew this resolution each year as required by the Constitution, Article 7, Section 10.13, to help fund the hospital reimbursements in Medicaid. This instrument was originally passed by the Legislature and the people in 2013 and represents a partnership between the hospitals to support and improve the cost coverage and reimbursement rate for our hospitals. The current assessment is anticipated to increase slightly from fiscal year 21. Hospitals will be assessed about $114 million in total. That allows for the drawdown of another $536 million in federal funding for a total contribution of $649 million. This helps preserve the rate restorations that have been made since we began running the resolution a number of years ago. Any unspent balance at year's end remains in the fund of LDH accordingly. The funding tied to this resolution is currently in HB 1, which is why the two instruments move together in the process. It is the same type of resolution that has been run for several years now, and the Louisiana Hospital Association is also here to answer any questions you may have. If there are no questions, I would ask for your favorable passage. Are there any questions? Yes, we do. Representative Edmonds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a question, but a statement, just a reminder that since our model has not gone through and we've got a change with CMS and all that's happening, I just want to remind us again that all of these subjects have been discussed and are in continuation of being discussed. The possible assessments, additional assessment, all of that's on the table. I'm not saying for or against. I'm just saying just for us, for information purposes, that there will be to the end of this year the possibility for agreement with CMS, and we'll then take a look at what that model might be. As we had mentioned earlier, Mr. Chairman, we had the opportunity to be able to speak into that. We're working on that with administration and with LDH and with the hospital station. All that discussion is current and will continue the remainder of the year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good deal. Thank you, Representative Edmonds. Representative Miller.
I have a question for Mr. Waddell. Piggybacking off of what Representative Edmonds said, so what happens if the plan that LDH decides to propose to CMS is different from the amount of this current assessment? Once this HCR passed, I mean, what are the legal rules? How do we move forward?
So Greg Waddell with Louisiana Hospital Association. So the resolution really doesn't have any impact on anything we're doing with supplemental payments or directed payments. These are actually two pretty separate things. So I would say in the immediate answer would be no impact, or there's no anticipated impact on the resolution.
But if we decided to amend anything from this resolution, maybe Jay can answer, I mean, what is the legal process on it? I'm just curious if they decide that they want to assess more than what we're currently assessing or less before we submit to CMS, or even after we submit to CMS and they accept, do we have to come back as a body, or can JLCB amend this HCR?
No, I can answer that. You can't amend the HCR once it passes. You probably would have to come back in a session if you wanted to make any changes in the hospital assessment. Would be my seat of the pants reaction to you, because I don't think you can change anything that's in the HCR, and I don't think CMS can mandate any particular payment. It would have to be something the legislature would decide to do based upon what CMS told you was allowable.
So with the current discussions with LDH on what proposal we're going to send to CMS, I think they said it's going to take them, 6-7 months before they maybe even draw up the plan. Could the hospitals operate without this ACR, or we have to pass the ACR every year in order to continue to function like we are?
I think you have to pass it every year to continue to function, continue to impose the charge.
And the HCR, Greg, would it be problematic if we left some wiggle room for LDH to decide what proper tax they would like to assess?
Well, I mean, I guess from the standpoint of the resolution as it's currently structured, those dollars aren't going to fund dollars that would be in supplemental payments or directed payments. So by amending the resolution, what you're really putting at risk is funding that's currently going to support Medicaid expansion, as well as a considerable amount of rate increases that we've done to the base rates for hospitals. That would be what would be.
So listen, Greg, we're not, and I'll speak for, I think, Representative Edmonds too. We are not against the resolution. We just don't. We want to leave LDH a little bit of wiggle room for whatever plan they submit to CMS. So that was my only questions.
Sure.
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Miller. And I think that's it. There are no other questions.
I can assure you, LDH is grateful for the wiggle.
Okay, members.
Wiggling.
If there are no other questions, I make a motion to report HCR 2 favorably. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, HCR 2 will be reported favorably. I'd also like to make a motion that HCR 2 be made special order number 9 for Thursday, May 6th. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, that motion is adopted. Okay, the final one, the one we were all looking for, is HB 639, members. HB 639. Members, HB 639 creates a fund to provide for the distribution of any money we may receive from the federal infrastructure bill currently being debated in Congress. Obviously, no bill has passed yet, but I would like to move forward with this bill to provide us with an avenue to create any necessary programs if Congress passes the federal bill. So it's essentially creating a fund for the utilization of those dollars. Is there any objection to the adoption or of moving favorably on HB 639? Hearing or seeing none, I'd like to report HB 639 favorably. Without objection, it will be reported favorably. Also, members, there was LSU Dairy Depart section has provided an LSU Ag reported ice cream. So if you want to grab some ice cream as a treat on the way out for all the hard work that y'all put in. But I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize the hard work by the staff who were up here late last night burning the midnight oil to make sure that it's ready. Thank the staff. And it also includes the administration as well. I know they provided a lot of assistance and support, and Jay and Barbara and Travis, we appreciate all of y'all's work and y'all's staff's work as well. Thank you. Okay, members. Oh, we do have cards. Before we go, I need to read in support. Let's see. Appropriations, Jim Patterson in support, Scott Kirkpatrick in support, Eric Ponte in support, Sutra Satap. Y'all know who it is. It's close enough. In support, Rochelle Dugas in support, Greg Waddell in support, Jennifer McMahon in support, and that's on HCR 2. I'm sorry, HCR 2, Jennifer and Greg in support. Also on HCR 2, Jim Harris in support, Scott Kirkpatrick, HCR 2 in support, Kerry Koch, HCR 2 in support, Johnny Koch, HCR 2 in support, and Bud Corson and Jen Nickel, HCR 2 in support, and Nick Watts, HCR 2 in support. Okay, members, that's it. I have a motion from Representative Desitel to adjourn. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing or seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, members.